Hello, my crushers. We're workshopping that. It is I, Krisis. You're having a crisis. It is me, live from New Zealand. I barely know what time it is. I don't know what I look like. I've rushed. Whoa. Ooh, I've rushed here to be with you because you had a time change, and then that means I have a time change, even though the time is the same for me. It's an assorted crisis event, really, in my life. But I'm here to talk to you about the pull list. It's my live show every week where we talk about all of the comics that were out in the American floppy market, but digital, last week. And I've read over 40 of them. So we're going to talk about all of those. We're going to talk about the other ones too. We're going to talk about everything. And the first thing we talk about before I even greet anybody or say hello is my top 10 comics of 2025. So this is based on an algorithm that I put some special sauce on top of. It is all of my favorite comics from this year so far, and there have been some shakeups, so let's get into it quickly. Then I'll say hello, then we'll do all the other stuff that we do. So here is my top 25 comic series, or top 10. Sorry if I said 25. It's the top 10 comic series of 2025. Here we go. Number 10, a new entry, because there's a new issue out this week, and I finally caught up on it, and it is not the book I thought it was going to be. Oh, I didn't start the timer. It is not the book I thought it was going to be. But it is the Tin Can Society. It's from Rick Remender's Giant Generator, but it's written by Peter Warren with amazing art from Francesco Mobley and Chris Chuckry. I cannot wait to talk about this, so hang around until the T's in our alphabet today, and we will get to it. Then, coming in at number 9, still Absolute Superman. Love Jason Aaron doing Hope Corps. Number 8, Batman Dark Patterns. Look, I remember to put the cover in this week by, see, this is why I usually have the credits, Dan Waters, Hayden Sherman, and Triona Farrell. Then, The Avengers by Jed McKay and Fareed Karami, colors from Federico Blee. Then, Jason Aaron again with his Bug Wars from Mohamed Ashwar, Matthew Wilson, and Becca Carey. Then back into the top 10 goes, oh boy, we got a hot one this week. It is The Ultimates by Denny's Camp, Juan Frigeri, and Federico Blee. Then again, although I wouldn't call him my favorite colorist. Then, of course, we have The Power Fantasy by Kieran Gillen and Casper Wingard with letters from Clayton Cowles. Then One World Under Doom from Ryan North, R.B. Silva, and David Curiel. Number 2, its highest position so far this Yet the Nice House by The Sea. As we know, it's my entire personality. And still at number 1, FML by Kelly Sue DeComic. David Lopez and Chris Peter. Look, I almost did it in the actual allotted 60 seconds. That's pretty impressive for me. Wow. What a weekend. What a week. What a day. What a life. What a world. Let's greet some commenters and then let's get into it. Fifth of Jack Gaming checked in before the show to say he wouldn't be able to make it live today, but that's okay. We love you just as much if you're on the replay. So if you're watching on the replay, whether you're Fifth of Jack Gaming or somebody else, I'm so happy to have you here. I'm just noticing how white the middle of my lip is. Sometimes we don't get to look at the makeup too much before we get on the program. And sometimes it doesn't look quite right. Okay. We have Patrick Borgeld, who was having a lovely conversation with me as I was trying frantically to get ready about things he's not caught up on, but he still chose to read Doctor Strange this week, which I cannot wait to talk about. Let's see who else is in the chat so far. Edwin Billiot, who I've been missing for the past 2 weeks. I hope you've been out doing wonderful things in the world, Edwin. So glad the time change here in the States makes it easier for me to now catch your live stream. Well, it's going to change again because then it changes for me in a month, but we'll get there when we get there. Bunkmaster B keeping up his trend of always saying hello before I'm even on the air because he is just what? Punctual. And he will be back in 3 hours when I'm surely going to be streaming. No, we're going to try to keep it to like 2 3/4 today. Stephen Patterson, looking forward to that time of the week again. James Abel, my frequent definitely diverge on a few this week. Hank saying, hey, all, it didn't come up. Hank, calling Hank, paging Hank. Uh-oh. There we go. Hey, all, looking forward to another great, entertaining stream. Ryan Bragg saying hello, everyone. Hello to you, Ryan. James, the media mancer, whose name I do enjoy saying when it is not too much of a tongue twister for me, saying hello. Saz Murph, who we love seeing on all of the streams and the family of channels that I am a part of, saying hey to everyone. For those of us in the U.S., hope losing the extra hour isn't too much of an annoyance. Hopefully you remembered that you were going to get an hour less of sleep last night. I believe when I stopped by Jess's show yesterday, he had not remembered that that was happening yesterday. Pity Ma saying good afternoon, all, great to be here. Patrick Borgeld is Geld or Geld, hard G or soft G, is in the Netherlands along with our good friend Max Appelman, who has a saying, oh, here I go butchering a language I've never spoken before in my life. Al Jahar Maj Godzit. All's Well that starts 10 minutes late. I don't know. Vincent Clark saying hello with a heart. Logan Wayne, who I feel like I get to talk to on almost every one of these shows, chiming in, saying hello to me and everyone in the chat. There's Max Appleman, who the starting time is all lies, strawberry lies. Max, of course, has a new Beetle Bop on his channel, and it was posted a little bit later in the day than he usually does, so he didn't get the hits that he usually does at the beginning. So I'm trusting that you all are going to go bookmark Max's channel, and then each one of you are going to watch his Beetle Bop 4 times when this video is over, so that we can get it to where it would be if he had posted it earlier in the day. I'm sure some part of the fault is mine for distracting him talking about comics. Adam S. Messenger can't stick around, but it's always good to see you, Adam, even if you cannot stick around. Richard Fearing, who I was talking to yesterday on Omnidog's Vault, hello to you, sir. Raging Sloths, I don't think I've said hello to you recently. Hey, everyone, finally made it to the beginning of the stream. Oh no, a name in, what is that, Cyrillic alphabet that I certainly can't pronounce. I'm so sorry. We're going to, it looks, I mean, I'm just going to call you KW because those are letters I recognize and I don't want to disrespect your name. Tin Can Society. Yeah, I was surprised, but I don't want to do any spoiling. Samantha Jane, my Kiwi friend, of course, off on her 6-kilometer run right now. I'm so hoping to get back to exercising this week, but I've been so busy that even feeding myself has been a little bit of a challenge the past couple weeks. So we're just taking it one bodily function at a time. John Parwell is saying Tin Can looks cool. I can't wait to talk about it. Caden Wisecup, another person I don't know if I've said hello to, longtime quiet viewer. See, that would be why I figured I'd finally say hi. Well, hello to you, Caden, and it's really wonderful to have you and to hear your voice today. And let you know my pull list is a highlight of Sundays and Mondays and Tuesdays, however long it takes to watch. Also, FML rocks. Yes, another FML fan. You know, they have a Discord that Kelly Sue DeConnick is on, and it's pretty much all about FML, but all the themes of FML too, like zines and punk rock, and they have a channel called Resistance School, so it's really cool and friendly. I don't really like Discording that much because I really just tend to totally lose myself in it, but it's a very friendly, low maintenance one. Jean-Remy Argueta, oh my gosh, so many people are here. Samantha Jane saying she's got a 10-hour flight this week. It's time to start the Ultimates. Well, boy, did you pick a good week, because this week's Ultimates is great. My friend Tiger Eyes and Impulse Buy, but sure do love that DC style guide. Such pretty nostalgia. I'm a nerd for communication stuff, so I, of course, had to buy it. I want to buy all of their style guides. They have one for NASA. I want all of them. Tiger Eyes, of course, is the head of polling for all of comicdom, really, all of collected comicdom, but specifically for Near Mint Condition, and we will be doing a Tiger Eyes Marvel poll, and gosh, I think only about 6 weeks, and I have not begun preparing, so I really got to get on that. Hello to Foxhound from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, a city I've actually spent a fair amount of time in, and that is not something I can say about many cities other than the ones I've lived in, but I've been to Fort Lauderdale many, many times. Super Jop, first time catching me live, I was going to say, I have a pretty decent memory for names combined with profile pic looks and colors, and I'm like, I don't remember that one. And I think I've said hello to all of the unique human beings right now. Yes, Cyrillic from Russia. Okay, so I kind of know a little bit. It's Kirill. Is that what your name is, or what my name would be? I think it's your name because it starts with a K, but my name starts with a K too. Surprise, confusing. But we're gonna Kirill. I can remember that because I'm Krisis and you're Kirill. I can do that. Oh, and then Nathan Stevenson. Hello from Chicago. Hello to you, Nathan Stevenson. I was just talking to one of my friends in the Chicago area yesterday, Johnny Boy, who's streaming with Omnidog's Vault. And of course, we could not have a stream without Joe Fisher, which X Factor wasn't ending after issue 10. Well, Joe Fisher might be one of the few people positive on X Factor, and we certainly couldn't have a stream without Lance J. McNair, who has some of the best Star Wars opinions. So Lance, I hope you're going to be here to the S's, because we have a new comic book to talk about today in Star Wars Jedi Knights, and I'm afraid that I'm not going to feel like my opinion is valid until I know what your opinion on it is too. So hopefully you will still be around, but no pressure. If you can't stick around that long, I totally understand. And then Nick N. Hello from Cleveland, Ohio. Okay. So for those of you who are just catching live for the first time, or maybe even tuning in for the first time, I'm Krisis with a K. I live in Wellington, New Zealand, and I read a whole lot of comic books. Why? Why do I read all these comic books? Well, first of all, because I think it is one of the most amazing and unique communication and artistic mediums that we have in this world, and we're very, very lucky to have it. But also because I've got this website called crushingkrisis.com that's been around since August 26, 2000, and I started talking about comics on it on August 26, 2010, and for the past 15 years, I've amassed hundreds, literal hundreds of guides to the reading order and collecting status of really just about every Marvel hero except for like Nick Fury, Winter Soldier, and a small handful of others. Man-Thing. Everybody else is there. A surprisingly large amount of DC guides and even some indie guides. So part of why I read so much is because every week when I read, I update all of the guides to show like when do story arcs end, what collection is this going to be, and do you have to critically read this before something else? And I also update all those guides every week as I put out my new releases post. So if you want to see what's on the pull list for the week before we get to the show, you can read Crushing Krisis, and I have all of Marvel and DC and Image new releases with similar commentary to the commentary I give here. But of course, I haven't read the issues yet at that point. It's before I read them. Then you get like a magic trick. Poof, you get me after I've read the issues here live. And I talk about, and if I knew you were all reading the post, then we could even get into was my guess about how it would go right or not. But that's just there if you're more into a text-based Krisis. And of course, all of that is supported by patreon.com/Krisis. My Patrons are amazing. They are literally paying the bills to keep Crushing Krisis alive. I know I've said it before, but the reason a lot of people just do YouTube and social media these days is because running a independent website is expensive. Do not trust all of the Squarespace ads that you hear on podcasts, because a site of my size, which has over 20,000 files and over 1,000 pages and 2,000 blog posts, you cannot run efficiently from Squarespace. So it takes a lot of hosting, it takes a lot of muscle powers from behind the scenes, it takes a lot of plugins, a lot of software, and the Patreon folks keep that alive and also pay for things that I need to be able to make this happen too. So there's rumors, Fleetwood Mac rumors that later this year, there's going to be a Patreon level that has to do with video. And I actually have a few thoughts on that today. But first, let me remind you how this goes. I'm going to ask you to start thinking and start asking me Ask Me Anythings. But before that, I do my Moment of Krisis, which is me just caterwauling for about 5 minutes about a topic that's on my mind based on this week's polls. And then we'll do some AMA. And then theoretically, we start looking at the comics at like the 26-minute mark, but that's a lie. Well, maybe at the 30-minute mark, we actually start looking at the comics, but I'm trying. I'm really, really trying. So, and I know this is a half hour later for those of you in the United States, but that's because you had your time changed, and soon I'll have my time changed. So previously I was 18 hours apart from you, but really it just means that I'm 6 hours earlier, but on a different day. It's easier to think about that way. But now I'm 7 hours earlier on a different day. So I had to start this earlier in the morning. And then when I have my time change in the opposite direction at the beginning of April, I will be 8 hours earlier on a different day. So we're just going to, the time's going to fluctuate in March. March and October are just wacky times for time if I am communicating here from New Zealand to you somewhere else in the world. Okay, let's do a Moment of Krisis. Then we'll do some AMA, start getting questions in. I won't see them until after the Moment of Krisis. And then we'll talk about comic books. Yeah, that's what we're here to do, right? Okay. Oh gosh, what are we talking about? Oh, I can think of a thing that's on my mind. Okay, so actually I'm going to do something unprecedented and bring up art during a Moment of Krisis just for a second. So FML, my favorite comic book right now, covers by David Lopez, who is the interior artist. Also, if I go to my #2 comic right now, which is Nice House by the Sea, covers by Alvaro Martinez, Bueno, and Jordi Belair, who are the interior artists, right? So I really like when a cover advertises what the guts of the comic book is going to look like. And that's because I come from a time in the 90s and the 80s and where usually the cover artist was the interior artist. Every so often you get a different cover artist, especially if the interior artist was a fill-in artist. But that kind of makes sense, right? Because the cover artist, if they're the regular series artist, they're kind of the brand. They're advertising for the brand of the book. And if you happen to get a fill-in on the inside, the cover is almost a promise of like, hey, it usually looks like this. We've just got somebody different this month, but it's going to continue looking like this in the future, right? So I never minded that, right? But then when I came back to comics, I feel like, is this too unbuttoned? I guess we can't tell with the banner there. I don't want to be too slutty for you on a Sunday afternoon. But Monday morning would be fine if you're in Australia or New Zealand. Aside. Okay, so then when I came back to comic books in 2010, part of why I came back, I'd been reading Astonishing, X-Men, and Planetary. So I'd been in an all John Cassaday diet, and I thought all interior comics looked like John Cassaday because he drew the entirety of both of those series. And in 2010, I just happened to be nosing around on Wikipedia or something, and I saw news about the X-Men event Second Coming. And it was while I was starting to put together my first X-Men guide, but I had no intent of catching up to new X-Men. I just basically wanted like all of Claremont at that point. And I saw these covers, these beautiful, amazing covers. And they were by Adi Granoff. And he did all of the covers of the Second Coming crossover. And because I had only been reading Planetary and Astonishing X-Men, which had covers by John Cassaday and interiors by John Cassaday and colorist Laura Martin, important to that equation, I thought that all comics looked like the covers still, the way they did in the 90s. And to my reading, the way they had through the 2000s. So I was like, oh, hell yes. X-Men comic books look like some like crazy borderline real life CG thing. You know, Adi Granoff's art was so amazing. So I started buying all the comics. And then of course I got to my first one and opened it. And I was like, what the hell is this? Because the inside still looked like the kind of comic book I knew and loved from many, many years, you know, and there were some really great artists on that crossover. But that's the reason I imprinted so early in my life, my return to comic life, on Greg Land. People think I'm joking when I say Greg Land is one of my favorite artists, but he was the only artist in those interiors at that time that I felt like was delivering anything close to the realism of character looks and faces, especially that, and hair, of course, that were on the covers. Now, I didn't know the whole tracing drama or whatever. I was new, and all there was at that point to talk about these things were the CBR message boards. So I just thought Greg Land, like, hell, well, if I can't have Adi Granoff in the end series, at least I could have Greg Land. Now, what's really interesting is how that's evolved over the past 15 years since I got back to comics. And, you know, I thought about doing a little like deep dive history, like where did all these, you know, cover artists come from? Where did the trend start? You know what? This is not a research show. If you want essays, there's plenty of comics or comic channels that do that. But the thing that it made me really reflect upon is I still really care about what the cover advertises will be inside the guts of the book. And I think I have a certain forgiveness margin for Marvel and DC at this point, because I know to keep interior artists going on the books week after week is hard, especially because interior artists now can't necessarily pump out 12 issues a year or more unless they're Dan Mora. And so it makes sense sometimes to have a different artist who's a cover artist because you spend so much more time illustrating a cover frequently. But at the same, and also not all interior artists are cover artists. Covers are different. They're pinups. Interior artists are sequential artists. Plus, there's a house style at Marvel and DC, and it's a house style somewhat of art, although certainly some books can look different sometimes. But it's also very much a house style of colors. They have very distinct house style of colors, and only certain books with certain feels break that. So I think it's fine to have alternate artists on the cover that are not the interior artists, because you kind of know what you're going to get from most Marvel and DC books. But the thing that really bugs me is indie books that have cover artists that are not the interior artists. Now, that's not so common at Image, but it's increasingly common for creator-owned or creator-participating series at other comic publishers. And I know there was one that I talked about, I think last week, Vicarious, that had these really cool covers by Dan Panosian that were like so evocative and really drew me in. And the interior art, it wasn't even a little bit like his covers. It could not be more different. It was like in a different universe than the look of his covers. And that really, for me, sets up expectations that can't be met, right? And if you're somebody who's just flipping through the previews catalog or just seeing the pictures on Comixology or at the comic shop just looking across the shelf, of course the covers draw you in. But to have a cover artist that's so different than the interior artist, to me, it's kind of false advertising, and it sets up expectations which are not going to be met. And there's this phrase I used last week on Your Mint Condition: expectations are the thief of joy. It's not my phrase, somebody else said it. But I think when you see a cover that's so spectacular in an indie book and then you get to the inside and it doesn't look like that book, that's disappointing. I think Zenoscope does it all the time because they're known for their really flashy, bright, saturated colors on the covers that are maybe a little cheesecakey too, and then the insides just look like a regular comic, right? But I think there are plenty of people who do that. Now, of course, there is a tradition of some comics having much more artistic covers than the inside. Sandman, of course, had covers exclusively by Dave McKean, who never, I think maybe once, illustrated in any interior pages of Sandman. And honestly, I am frequently disappointed when I read Sandman because I'm like, what the crap is this interior art? I was promised a Dave McKean cover. And so Sandman, I think for me, I had this expectation that it was this thing, this certain thing. And then when I started reading, I'm like, the interiors of this comic book just look like any other comic book. Now, granted, there are some beautiful interiors in Sandman, but I was just thinking about that and looking at the comics that are in my top 10 and the comics that are ranking well. I don't tend to respond well to comics that have vastly, vastly different covers than their interiors outside of Marvel and DC. I think at Marvel and DC, like I said, there's a certain amount of forgiveness. And I guess I was just curious to know what you all think about it, because for me, it's something that annoys me every week, and especially when I get a new #1 series, especially from one of these companies that are serial offenders of this, which I absolutely would put Dynamite and Zenoscope at the top of that list, but IDW, also an offender. Dark Horse tends to have the interior artist in the cover, but not always. And Image, I think, very, very frequently have the interior artist in the cover. And I open the book and I'm like, well, I might not have bought this if I knew that the cover was not represented. So that's my moment of crisis. I don't really have a resolve. It's more of an open question of what you feel about this. How do you feel about covers as advertisements when the advertisement doesn't necessarily reflect on the thing that's on the inside? I'm going to start to get your response to that. I have to monkey with my power situation here for a second because my power fantasy is not giving right now. The thing it's not giving is power. This computer is on its last legs, and as it's dying, the power ports are dying one by one. It's like an elimination game. And as they're dying one by one, it's making it trickier and trickier to have these live shows, because if all the ports die, how am I going to keep the computer charged through, there we go, through the show? Okay, I'm going to catch up on all of your comments, starting from the hellos and pushing through any questions you have to ask. I'm just reminding myself, this name is Kirill. I'm Krisis, and they are Kirill. Patrick Borgle, Denver, we don't breathe here on the pull list. There's no time for breathing. There's 3 hours of comics to talk about, but thank you for the reminder. Richard Fearing agreeing, comics are wonderful. Joe Fisher saying, Cool Angel coming off of the Ashes storyline. It seems like they had no plan and also way too many books at once. Yeah, I mean, we're going to come back and talk about that as a moment of crisis in the next couple of weeks. There are too many X books and they don't have their individual identities. The quality's not high enough. Krakoa had it right, man. Hickman launched with 6 books, and it stayed as 6 books for 6 months. That was the right thing to do. It let people settle in. It let them understand what that period was about. But of course, if your period's not about anything, that strategy is not going to help you. Earth's Geomancer, any recommendations for those of us that have too many hobbies, comics included? Well, you know, something that way to lead off with an AMA, even before I was done the moment of crisis. We appreciate that here. So here's the thing. I always operate from this perspective of margins and marginal time, right? Nobody's perfect at time blocking, meaning putting things on your schedule exactly at the time periods you're going to do them for exactly how long you do them. And if you don't leave yourself any margins or lag time or slack time in your schedule, then you're always going to feel behind like this one. And I think that something that people get wrong is they think they need to give time to certain things that they can eliminate. So if you're saying, look, let's say you have you want to be a woodworker, right? You have the stuff in your garage, you love woodworking, you just never make time to do it. If you were to do a time diary of your week and keep track of everything you did for 7 days, which I do once a year, legit every single year, just like keeping a budget, I keep a time diary once a week. You might find that you are spending stuff on things that you care way, way less about than woodworking. You might be watching like Wheel of Fortune every night for some reason, just because you're tired and you sit on the couch at that time. That could be your woodworking time. Or you might find that like you are driving somewhere too early and you're sitting in your car there waiting for the thing to happen. Could you change your drive time? Or would it be different if you took the bus? Because then you could do your comic reading on the bus, but then you would get home later, but have the comics already done and would have time for woodworking. So I don't really have any good suggestions on how to balance hobbies. I have hobbies I wish I was spending more time on right now, but I do have suggestions on how to reevaluate your time and make sure you're not losing too much at the margins to things you don't even care about. Like if you don't really care about TV shows that much, why are you scrolling Netflix? If you don't derive as much joy from scrolling through TikTok as you do from reading comic books, why are you scrolling through TikTok? And I know sometimes our brain needs a rest, but that's slack time. That means take that TikTok scroll time and make it like being on the bus in the morning. Make it like being right before bed when you're totally out of brain. Make it being on the toilet. Make it being a time that you're not going to do anything else anyway, because that's a good time to just do that slack activity. The slack or the lag activity you don't want in prime time. I find sometimes I'm like doing some slack activity at like 4:30 in the afternoon. That's prime time. I could be exercising. I could be playing guitar. I could be reading comic books. I could be working in CK. I got to get rid of that slack at the wrong time of day. So Earth's Geomancer, I feel really passionately about this. We could talk offline or on Blue Sky or something about time diarying and time blocking and all the benefits I think there are to that, because I have a big strategy that I enact at least once a year, if not twice a year. And I think it really keeps me honest about how I spend my time. Do I need to read the tie-ins for Secret Wars 2? Wow, y'all are coming with great questions today, says Foxhound. No. I would say Secret Wars 2, the Beyonder does get around the Marvel Universe, but I think most of the main plot is contained or recapped in Secret Wars 2. And I think only if you get to an issue where you're like, oh, wow, that fight with the New Mutants sounds really, really interesting. Well, then you can go read New Mutants, and there's like issues and issues of Claremont doing things in New Mutants. But I don't know that there's any like plot MacGuffin of Secret Wars 2 that is so important that I would be like, you have to read all the tie-ins. And there was no home book. I mean, he does interact with Spider-Man a lot, but he does interact with the Fantastic Four a lot. But I don't know that I would say there's any like home title of Secret Wars 2 the way there is now, where like, okay, Blood Hunt is crossing over through the whole Marvel universe, but you probably definitely want to read Moon Knight and Doctor Strange. I don't think there's anything like that in Secret Wars 2. Did I ever get into Wet Moon by Sophie Campbell? No, I haven't. Sophie Campbell, I really enjoyed on, I want to say Glory was where I first saw her art. I could be mistaken. But then I liked her drawing Ninja Turtles. But then when she started writing Ninja Turtles, I got really angry because it wasn't what I wanted the title to be, which is not her fault. And so I never really pursued other stuff from her. But maybe I should check out Wet Moon. I don't know. Tell me what it's about, Jarn. Edwin Billett, am I going to be on Monday's Map My Ex for Magneto? Of course I am. Of course. Do I have that mapping ready yet? No. I mean, I have a Magneto guide on my site, which is public, so you can go and play the home game on the guide. I kind of, in my head, know what I want it to be, and I'm pretty sure it's 2 volumes. It might be 3 volumes, but that's what I'll be doing for the rest of the day after the stream is over. Sazmurph, now we're into the moment of crisis, misses the days when cover artists and interior artists were usually the same person. Nick N, do I hear correctly they're going to be a Transformers Kickstarter that will include the Marvel comics as well as the coveted UK comics? Yes, Nick, and it is one of the most drawn from a dream mapping news that I've ever seen, because it sounds like they're going to be issuing the full Marvel run, but then they're also, just for the Kickstarter, issuing the Marvel run with the UK extra material integrated, which if you don't know Transformers UK that well, which I don't, Omar and I on the stream the other day compared it to what if they took classic X-Men and they totally threaded all of the extra scenes and all of the short stories in with Uncanny X-Men so that you could just read it all in one go. It's sort of like that. So it's something that people on the internet have made guides to, not me, because I'm not a Transformers person, but that you would have to either do with floppy comics from the United States or from the UK, or you would have to have like illegal scans of them because there's no legal digital versions of the UK Transformers comics. So it's a big deal. I almost want to get it, even not as a Transformers person, just because it's one of the most audaciously great feats of mapping I've ever heard a publisher engage in. Raging Sloths covers can be so deceiving. What's the inside? Agreed. Joe Fisher talking about not many people like the Krakoa era. I think a lot of people like the Krakoa era. It had its ups and downs and so times that I did end up liking a lot of the characters that I didn't like before. You know, I think there was a big divide. I think a lot of people I like and respect. Brett White, who's an amazing writer, and I forget the name of it. I'll find the name of his website real quick. But he used to write for CBR back in the day. If you read Kelly Thompson's I think it's called Pop Heist. If you read Kelly Thompson's article back in the day, you probably also read Brett White. Brett White's a huge X-Men fan, and I usually trust his opinions implicitly. And when we got to the beginning of Krakoa, Brett White was like, I just can't. The villains on the island, the Crucible, it's just not my X-Men. And I appreciate that, because he was not coming from a place where I think some people just could not get over that mutants would want or deserve their own nation. And they're like, what's an ethno state? I'm like, yeah, but this is a comic book. It's a safe community. And they, had very differing opinions amongst them about if any humans should be there. Those people I don't trust. Those people are like, ethno states are not for mutants. I'm like, you might be slightly missing the point of X-Men, or trying to make it too much of a real world analog. But the people who are like, I just can't get down with Mr. Sinister being on the island, I understand that. I think the story excused that brilliantly, and it made for, to me, the best X-Men story ever. And I don't know if X-Men comics really need to be made ever again, but that's just me. And I do respect you if you did not like Krakoa. I don't respect you if you like that new Sentinel comic, though. That was pretty terrible. No, I still respect you. I just don't trust your taste. Jarn Parwells, what's my favorite non-Darwin Cook Catwoman? Well, I'm from the 90s, so I like Jim Balent Catwoman. Talk about covers that match the interiors. Yeah, I mean, but it's hard to find a really well-written Catwoman. I think in my mind, know exactly who she should be. I almost would want to write Catwoman. I swear I know exactly who she is. And she's not even my favorite comic book character. But I think so often it just doesn't quite get there. And I like Tarun Gunbach's voice for her right now. I don't know if the plot is for me, but I think Tarun definitely gets her voice. But I guess I'm just going to say Jim Balent, because I love the 90s. Edwin Billiot saying, I like Red Glands. I noticed too many of his female characters had that, look with their mouth. Once I heard the stories of where he's tracing from, it really ruined it for me. I intellectually understand that. But in my heart, all I know is that they look like people from real life because he's tracing them. And I wanted that when I came back to comics in 2010. So it's like, I can't let go. And also, I think he's very good at certain things. You've heard me say this 100 times. I think he's actually really good at monsters. I think he's really good at masks. The thing is, the guy can draw, but he likes being on time and he likes speeding through things. And the man will take a shortcut, right? Salvador Larroca will too. But I think when he's not taking shortcuts, he's actually a really good artist. And it's just been so long since we've seen him do whole issues of that we like, nobody remembers what that looks like anymore. Kieran Gillen always got great art from Greg Land. I think certain writers write to his strengths more than others. Joe, now we're just talking a lot about Krakoa. That's between you all, so I'm not going to get into all that. Max Appleman saying, yes, I agree about the cover thing, especially when the cover shows characters that are not even the issue. Well, that's hard, though, because there's this whole, especially at Marvel and DC, there's this whole editorial communication where they have to get the cover sometimes before the whole issue is even put together because of the timing of when it has to go into previews. And so sometimes they're like, yeah, there's probably an issue that we're going to fight Fin Fang Foom. And then it turns out that he's only the cliffhanger and Fin Fang Foom is in the next issue. So I see that Omar mentioned there will be 13 more Omnis announced for 2025. That seems crazy. I agree. It seems crazy, especially with all the tariff nonsense being what it is. But I guess that means we have at least 13 more announcements between when you and I need to be ready to start doing the poll. Hank thinks cover art should really reflect the inside. It's the preview of what to expect. It's totally false advertising that isn't. I agree. Jarn Powells says, my superhero comic selection always starts with looking at the free sample in Google Books because I ain't trusting that cover. If I had infinite time, I would say, here's one of those margin things, going back to talking about how to find more time for your hobbies. And this is not about you, Jarn. I think the thing you're doing is smart. You should preview them. Comics are so expensive. If you're not a freak like me, you should absolutely pay attention to what the interior will look like. I think people engaging in marketing of comics, unless you get so much delight from the marketing of comics, right? Stop it. That's a waste of time. What are you getting from like going over every solicit and arguing over of who's going to appear and where? If that's the thing that like seriously delights you about comics, more power to you. But I'm willing to bet you would rather be reading a comic than responding to all that stuff. So I'm not saying don't look at the interior previews, but the people who are like on Reddit, like, which I love Reddit, I'm a Redditor, but I'm saying the people who are on Reddit, like reading the 3-page preview to every single comic that's going to be out the next week, you could probably be reading actual comics during that time. Or unless you're telling me you just skip the first 3 pages when you get to that actual comic the next week because you read them already. That to me is one of those marginal activities of like, it's not actually bringing you joy. So why are you doing it? Again, this is not about Jarn looking at the interior to see if it matches the cover artist. That's different. That's like shopping. It's window shopping, comparison shopping. That has value. But I think that's one of those things that comic fans do that has no actual value, only marginal value, which is get so engaged in the solicit cycle that like they're spending hours on the solicit cycle and then not spending any time in the actual comics. Hank's saying there's been times the cover art has put him off of the book and then finding out later the art in the interior is different. I would agree with that too. I think Zenescope, by the way, and also Vampirella and some other stuff at Dynamite has this reputation for being totally cheesecakey, and then you open the book and it's not there at all. That kept me away from Zenescope for like probably 5 years until finally when I started this read everything experiment in 2017, I just picked 1 month that I was going to read every Zenescope book, and I was like, the interiors, it's just a comic book. Like I always thought it was going to be like Lady Death, like all about TNA, and it's not at all. And I was like totally surprised. Foxhound, am I fried after every stream? Yeah, I am, especially these because I'm by myself and I do so much of the talking all on my own. Sorry, I dropped something. I wasn't just trying to have like a dramatic hair moment. Yeah, it takes me time to recover from this one. Some of the other ones I bounce back a little bit more quickly, but I need to schedule like a different texture of activity afterwards. I can't, sometimes it's good if I exercise right afterwards because I am kind of like adrenalinized. I probably answered this in the past, but who's my favorite X-Men character? Changes. Historically, I really liked Rogue, but I get upset. I feel like a lot of Rogue stories have been told, and especially after Mike Carey, I'm the kind of person where a lot of times in comics, I will, if I feel like the story has been told, I kind of tune out after that. That's with Krakoa. I feel like the story has been told, so I like to tune out a little bit. And I feel like after Mike Carey, I don't know that anybody else has figured the right story to tell with Rogue, so I kind of tuned out. I really love Kitty Pryde. I kind of feel like that about Kitty Pryde and Marauders, where I'm like, I don't know if I need more Kitty Pryde. I do really still love Dazzler, and I don't know that anybody has ever figured out the Dazzler story. Greg Pak took a very fun try at it. In Extreme X-Men, it was a good Dazzler story. I don't know if it was the Dazzler story. So I still would say that Dazzler's pretty far up there as well. And do I think the Epic Collection price hike is going to affect my purchasing down the line? Yeah, I mean, this tariff thing, Curtis explains it really well. Curtis from Epic Marvel Pod, who I just realized I need to add to my Friends of Crushing Crisis strip on the channel. But Curtis's point is the tariff does not just apply to your book once. The tariff might apply when, let's just talk about Canada and the United States. Maybe one of them buys a printing press from the other, where there's a tariff on that. And then one of them, the person with the printing press buys paper from the other, where there's a tariff on that. Then the book gets made, there's a tariff on that. So then the book gets sent across the other country, and there's a tariff on that. And then you order the book back to the country that you live in, which a lot of times happens for Canadians who are ordering books that got printed in Canada, but then got shipped to the United States. And now they turn from a Canadian product to a United States product, but the tariff already got paid once, but now you're paying the tariff again. So I think that's what people don't realize about tariffs. There's very few things that are only going to get tariffed once. Like celery, I guess, is only going to get tariffed. If you're getting Mexican celery, I don't know who grows celery. That's just celery. So you're probably only get hit with a one-way tariff as that crosses one border. But more complex things, books, guitars, electronics, sometimes they cross in and out of the United States multiple times from the point of the inception of the manufacturing process to the finished product and then getting it. And I think we're going to get hit with a lot of tariffs, and it's going to hurt for me because I am then in New Zealand, where I also have to pay to get things shipped here, and I have to pay a customs tax on certain things that come into the country. I had to pay a customs tax on an IST box last month, and the customs tax was 30% of the value of the box in that, which was my own fault for messing up some math on my side. I'm always going to buy all of the epics in the classic line, but I think the classic line, there's not that much more. And of course, they've extended it past 1998, but I'm not going to have to do this again. Like, these are here. There's not enough other Marvel titles for them to put out this many books again, unless they go really deep into Silver Age stuff that nobody's going to buy. Like, there's never going to be a Millie the Model epic line. So I'm not super worried about keeping up on epics. It's manageable. There's usually the most is like 3 per month. Like I budget for that. I am a little bit more worried about having just started these DC Finest and being like, I'm going to keep up with it because they were coming out at the rate 1 per week. Am I going to be able to keep up with that? I don't know. Masterworks, I think I'm done. I think there's only 1 or 2 more Masterworks I need, because I knew in my mind where the cutoff was for every Masterwork, that I didn't get. To me, after a certain year, after a certain creator or storyline, it's not Masterworks anymore, it's just comics. And I think I'm just about out. I think I'm just trying to finish Marvel 2-in-1, and that might be it. And Marvel Team Up. Yeah, and I might be out. So that's good, because they're, I think, probably going to get a lot more expensive than Omnibus. Like, who knows? So who knows what the future will bring. And maybe you weren't even talking about tariffs, but I think any price hiking that's happening right now absolutely has buffering for the price of the tariffs in mind. Okay. I went 7 minutes longer than I said I was going to. But now we are going to get into some comics. So let me get all my PDFs arranged, and hopefully again, just like I hadn't looked at my face before I got on the stream, which probably is not a habit I need to get into. I also absolutely did not look at my my compilation of covers and credits before I got on the screen either. So that all could just go really haywire, and let's just see how it goes. So for those of you who have never watched before, which might just be a few of you, who knows? I literally have read, usually my pull is over 40 books, usually sometimes north of 50. And that's in the American digital floppy market, or just, we could say, the American floppy market in general. And I try historically to read about 50% of the American market. I don't always get to that mark. It's not like a hard and fast rule. And so I truly do probably read more. I think I must read more new comics than almost anyone else in the world. That's why I do the show. And it's not really a magic trick. I think of it like a magic trick, but it's the magic trick of wasting a lot of my time on money on comic books. So anybody's capable of doing this if you've got 10 hours a week to do it in, and the budget and the brain space and the organization ability to do it. But I just happen to do it. And so now we're going to talk about them. Okay. So I don't look at the comments. I said comics instead of comments. Drink, even if you're drinking tea, that's the rule. I don't look at the comments quite as much as I'm going through the books. So I'll periodically check in. This is not the right period to ask me really open-ended questions like who is your favorite X-Men. That was more of an AMA thing, and at the end you'll have a chance again. Just because I might pass, I will love you asking that, but I might pass over it just because there's so much to get through. So and also I never highlight the comics where you're comments. I think I said at that time where you're just talking amongst yourselves. I try to just give you that, you know, this is a community. Community's fun. So feel free to talk amongst yourself. I'm not going to highlight you adding each other, but just so you know kind of where we stand. Let me bring up my credits PDF. Okay, let's go. As I mentioned last week, have given up reading 2000 AD. It wasn't sparking joy. I like some of the stuff, like this particular story of Hawk. I really, really like, but the just totally random nature of it, it's not even themed around just fantasy or just sci-fi. I was reading at the end of my poll as a reward and it was not rewarding. So I'm done with 2000 AD. We're always going to start with it. I think it's just tradition to see the cover of two. And then if the cover looks cool, maybe sometime I'll check it out. I've not been reading Arcbound because it was co-written by Scott Snyder and I'm not a tremendous Scott Snyder fan. If any of you were in the comments telling me that it's amazing, I would maybe check it out. But I have not heard any comments such as that, and so I don't have any reason to believe that. So then we come to the first one that I've read, which is one of Marvel's digital comics, which is The Astonishing Avengers. The Astonishing Avengers, oh, where's my credits PDF? It's written by Steve Orlando, and some other stuff happens too. Has art from Francesco Argentino, colors from Carlos Lopez, and letters from Travis Lanham. Look, I don't know that I need to spend a whole minute on this. It's very cute. It's a very cute B team of Avengers. I think this artist, Arcbound, is doing okay with using the vertical scroll. I actually highlighted this because I think that this is very few of the artists doing these digital comics think to split up the page even more in the vertical scroll. They're usually making really long panels. I love how we got into these little slices of panels and then two panels side by side under the slices. None of them are really doing that. I think there's more to this format than just having it be an up and down toilet paper roll of comic book panels. And so I really appreciated this. I don't understand why Elektra is there on the Avengers. I do not understand why Steve Orlando is obsessed with saying that Elektra is telepathic again. She has some telepath-esque powers from the hand, but she's not a telepath. And we got into this deep last week because my buddy Tim Burnham was here, who's like read every Daredevil comic ever just about, and he explained it. But I just don't understand the fixation. And that's, you know, you can read those for free if you have Marvel Unlimited, which itself is not free, but once you have it, these are free on it. This is Avengers Academy, which comes out almost every week. It's by Anthony Oliveira with art from Pablo Collar, colors from KJ Diaz, and letters from Ariana Mayer. I really like this comic. It's a fun, queer little comic, but I didn't really like this issue. The characters, two of the main characters, Kid Juggernaut and Captain America of the Railways, got thrust back through time as the result of a previous issue, and this just is following them all being in World War II. I don't know why every comic is doing a World War II riff. I guess Nazis is why, but it feels like everybody's doing World War II right now. The thing was, the art was really, really good, but it just didn't focus on them as much. It was focusing on like the whole battle, and then people get captured, and then then there are some familiar characters that we know who are creating problems in World War II, some of whom traveled through time. But I like this book because it's like my comfort book where I get to spend the time with a lot of the Avengers Academy, like younger Marvel characters. And so I know a lot of people like this issue online. For me, it was a slight misstep because it was focused on so many things other than the Young Avengers characters. So I don't think you should jump in here. If you do have Marvel Unlimited, I highly recommend that you check out this book. It's not a super quick, like 1 minute read, like a lot of the online books. It's really like a full issue of a comic book every single week, and you're missing out. I mean, that itself pays for your Marvel subscription to Marvel Unlimited every month, which is what, like $7-8. If you get multiple free whole comics on it, even leaving aside all the rest of Marvel, these are exclusive to it. That pretty much pays for itself. So I still like this series. I just wasn't too excited about that particular one. Okay, we're gonna have some early rant and raving today about Batgirl issue number 5. This is by Tate Brombol, writer Takeshi Miyazawa, pencils and inks, Wayne Foster, also on inks, Mike Spicer colors, and Tom Napolitano letters. Tate Brombol, what is wrong with you? Why? You have one of the most beloved characters at DC. She's so fun to write. She's full of action. You can kind of use her to reflect the environment around her. Why are you writing such a goddamn stupid story? I hated the first 4 issues of this, not because of the art, because Miyazawa's art is gorgeous, but because they were all 4 issues were the same thing. Her and her mom, Lady Shiva, having a standoff and talking about it with a little burst of action in the middle, and a conversation that took 4 issues and basically just ended with Lady Shiva being kidnapped, which could have just happened at the end of the first issue and nothing would have changed. So now we get one issue where Batgirl chases her. I thought there was going to be some texture or something different. No, let's just dive right back into Batgirl being in the middle of all these assassins. And also to make it even more dull and boring, let's like intersperse hallucinations or like flashbacks constantly through the issue. So it's hard to even tell where we are in time. And so we can't even appreciate Batgirl doing anything Batgirl. And then at the end, let's just have them both be captured again because we can't have anything fucking else to do with this comic book with one of the most favorited fan favorite characters in all of DC. You have one of the best artists in the industry, Takeshi Miyazawa. Mike Spicer's colors are amazing. And you're just sitting there diddling your thumbs together because you have no fucking clue of what to do with the plot of this character. And to add insult to injury, this comes out the same week of Birds of Prey in the release schedule. And Birds of Prey has Kelly Thompson just running circles around this with using Cascade with an even more limited panel time because she's not the main character in that comic book. And Kelly Thompson is still doing it better. Type Bravo, we were rooting for you. We were all rooting for you. Why does this suck so much? I see people say that they like it online. I don't trust them. I think they're only reading one comic per month or something. And so they have patience for this nonsense. As somebody who reads a lot of comics every single week, this is nonsense. God, it makes me so angry. Okay, this is Batman Full Moon. It's the last issue. It's a Black Label title. I haven't been keeping up with it. I don't usually read Black Label because they're kind of like outside of continuity. But it is by Rodney Barnes, who I do love from Philadelphia. So maybe at some point I will read it. It's Batman and Werewolves. This is another one of the Marvel comic books on Marvel Unlimited. Do you think they purposely put them all at the beginning of the alphabet just so they're easy to find? This is written by Steve Fox, who a lot of people are kind of like hot and cold on a lot of the actual Marvel books he writes, but he came from the world of YA graphic novels and stuff. So he's really good at writing like light, fun kid stuff. And with artist Armand Bodnar, color artist KG Diaz, and letterer Joe Sabino, this is really cute. I mean, this is one of those ones that's just like barely even 10 panels, but basically this very cartoonish, out of continuity version of Werewolf by Night is wandering around with Man-Thing. They're trying to find somewhere to stay in New York City, and they run into Spider-Man. It's very, very cute. It's very, very funny. I certainly appreciated it. And I think if you like this kind of cartoony world of non-continuity comics, like It's Jeff, but you want one that has like a little bit more of a like dialogue jokes in it instead of just art jokes, this is really, really fun. And Steve Fox, some of them really don't work for me at all. Every issue of this I've read by Steve Fox, which is all of them, have really worked, and it's really, really adorable. Now we come to Betty and Veronica, Friends Forever, Once Upon a Time. I did not read those. I was never really an Archie Comics fan, even going back to my youth. I did read Archie Comics for a little bit from when Mark Waid and Nick Spencer took over for a while in the 2010s, and some of that was really good, but I just don't get super engaged because it just kind of goes on and on and on and on and on and on and on. But if you have affection for these characters, they're still out there having comic books made about them. Next, as luck would have it, is Birds of Prey. Let me just start up the clock here. Birds of Prey, of course, written by the amazing Kelly Thompson. And if I could find the credits on this credits page that I saved, I might have to restart the clock because I can't find the actual credits. Kelly Thompson, writer, Juan Cabal, artist who I love, and I don't think he had done any art for DC prior to this. Oh boy. Oh no. I'm making, okay, we need to just stop for a second. I thought I was zooming in. I thought I was zooming in on the, zoom to fit. Okay. I thought I was zooming in on the credits, and I was like, why are the credits not getting bigger? And I was zooming in on my clock, which was not helping me at all. Let's try that again, shall we? Okay. This is Birds of Prey. It is written by Kelly Thompson from art from Juan Cabal, who I love. I love him originally from X-23. Colors by Adriano Lucas, who I originally loved from Birthright, and letters from Clayton Cowles. This was really fun. So here's a great example. Dan Panosian on the cover. I mean, look at this cover. If you saw this cover, you'd be like, oh, hell yes, I'm going to read that comic. Now, I love Juan Cabal, so I was not disappointed when I got to the inside, but this does not match that cover. You cannot tell me that it matched that cover. But this issue was so hilarious. And Kelly Thompson's smart. And she said that DC gives more leeway about arcs than Marvel does. So she just did a really long opening arc. Then she did a 4-issue second arc. And then this arc was only 2 issues. And it split up Black Canary and Sin away from Big Barda and Batgirl. So there was like a lot of room to do stuff. And both of the plots are really, really good. There was terrific action in the Black Canary and Sin side of it that also sets up more plot development. And there was just hilarious action with Big Barda. And who? Batgirl in the other half of it as they are trying to briefly retrieve Constantine from a magical dimension where he's been locked. I think if you wanted to check out this comic and you haven't really known like where to jump in or what you should do, even though I think the issue number 1 is one of the best number 1 scripts I've read in my life, I do think you could pick up issues 18 and 19, and they're very fun, very lightweight introduction to who this team is, why to care about them, and just what's so great about this comic book. And here's another page, all silent. I just wanted to show you because here's somebody who's using Cass really, really well. She's looking around this enemy they've shattered. It's all little pieces. She's seen one of them reform, so she knows she has a minute to get rid of all of them. Silent, she runs and throws one in a store. She tosses it in, she closes the door. She sees another one, she punts it. She sees another one, she puts it in the barrel. She sits in the barrel, she looks both ways. Constantine comes out. Batgirl, bat bloody time. Hilarious. Perfect use of her. She doesn't have to just fight the same ninjas again and again. Like she can be a comedic character, even though she's not funny, because you can use her tactical prowess and her adaptability and her efficiency and her silence for funny things. Kelly Thompson should be writing the Batgirl comic. Okay. Blade Forger. Well, here's the book that's going to send James Abel and I to our couples counselor for the first time this week, because I have some opinions on this. Okay. So this is Blade Forger. It's by the Miranda brothers, Naki and Roy Miranda. Inaki Miranda does the art, colors from Eva De La Cruz, and letters from Dave Sharp. I could not have possibly hated this more. It was a 0.5 out of 5 comic book for me, not because it was badly made. And I think in reflecting what I rank the lowest, it's never a comic book that's like horrible. It's a comic that I think has done so many things wrong or unwisely that I can't. I did it again. That I can't tolerate it anymore, and that is absolutely what is happening here. So it's the story of this kingdom, but whoever wins the trial fight gets to be king of the kingdom. But that doesn't happen all the time, but maybe it does. So then there's this guy who was a kid, and ever since he was a kid, he was training to be in this Hunger Games thing so that he can win. But then we follow him through some of the things that he's winning, but also he's already won. But also he's in a plane flying around because that's the only way he can get to the tournaments. But then he's won, but also later he's the king, but he's a terrible king, and so now his kid is going to have to kill him. But that's not how it works, because you're supposed to be in the tournament to win. Does the tournament still happen? How's he gotten so old? Does it mean he's been winning the tournament all the time? Shut the fuck up. Stupid. And stupid, just stupid. I could tell it was going to be bad because, and this is on Global Comics, by the way, I could tell it was going to be bad because in the intro text, it was badly edited. There was nothing like grammatically wrong with it, but as I was reading the little like opening crawl on the credits page, I was like, something's not right about this text. Like, it's not organized well. And so I was like, I hope that's not going to be a sign. And then the inside of the comic, I think, was a hot mess. The story just did not make any sense. But more to the point, and this was almost my moment of crisis today, the whole skipping around in time as much as they did and not giving us any time to really sit with him and get happy that he was winning the challenge tournament, and then he's king and he's bad. It meant that flip to seeing him as the king bad. I had no investment in that. In a number 1 issue, you have to either give us like a mystery to unravel or like a plot that draws us in, or you've got to give us a character to root for. And I think character to root for generally is the best idea, even if you're doing one of the other things too. And since we couldn't root for him because we never got to spend time looking right at him, he's always like flying through the panel all the time. I don't think these creators are experienced enough to do the amount of time shenanigans they did here. Some people have told me, oh, it's very manga influenced. Well, those people are very experienced. I don't think these creators are experienced enough. So like, because at the end, when it's like, now he's evil, there's no way to react to that because we don't have any feelings about him. And I think that that's a problem that a lot of indie comic number 1s are having right now. And that's why it was almost my moment of crisis. Maybe it will be in the future, because it's, it doesn't, if you don't know, if you haven't helped, oh boy, if you haven't helped the reader understand who to like and root for in your comic, then when you do a big twist, they don't have an emotional investment in that. And I don't think this story is bad. I think that there was a chance to get us invested, and because we didn't get invested, the story's not hitting. That's what I would say about that. Okay, let's try not to zoom in on that anymore, shall we? Okay, because it's really confusing me. This is by Keenspot. So I regret to inform you that somebody in the comments did actually say that they have read a Keenspot comic before. And I promised if I found any human being on earth who actually has read a Keenspot comic, I would start to try to check them out. So that means next week, I'm going to have to try to see if there's a way to read Keenspot comics digitally. But it wasn't this week, so I did not read the Chopping Block issue number 6. And then Cruel Kingdom. Oh, All right. You're going to find I had a very rough time at the beginning of the alphabet. It doesn't mean I'm a hater. I'm not drinking straight haterade. I just was not enjoying the beginning of the alphabet this week. I don't... Okay, so this is in the style of old EC comics, and it's an anthology series, and it's all fantasy stories. So of course, if you have an anthology series, you have to make sure that every story really hits, because you have a limited amount of pages and it has to have a strong central theme. When I tell you there are 2 stories out of the 3 in this, I could not explain to you what they were about. One of them is by Christopher Cantwell, who's pretty good at this sort of thing, and it's about King Arthur like getting killed. I still don't understand what it's about. He has dinner with orphans once a year, and then because he feels bad, but then he doesn't do anything about it, and the orphans killed him. Like, it's not a story. There's no plot. The same was the true for the third one by Karina Becco, Heart of Ice. It was like somebody was a bounty hunter, and then she killed her bounty. Like, it didn't go anywhere. The first story, Just Desserts by Matt Bors, kind of went somewhere because it did give us a perspective character. It did have kind of like a twist. Basically that there's these little people, like the borrowers, that like little tiny people who live in this castle, and this chef, we think she's like a good person, but it turns out she cooks them for her king. But then it's like, and then she keeps cooking them, and then they eventually get their revenge. It just really felt like 3 stories that no one needed to tell. Like, it just feels like these people were compelled, like their arm was twisted, like, write a story for a comic book. And then they wrote, 3 of the most boring stories I've ever read. And then the comic book was boring. So you know what? I can't keep buying this. Even though I loved the first issue, it had the most amazing stories from Greg Pak and Al Ewing, which I could probably beat for beat explain them to you right now, because they stuck with me so much. They felt like stories that were like bursting out of the pen or keyboard, demanding they be told. This is just some warmed over bullshit. So like, no, I'm not going to keep getting this anthology book full of warmed over bullshit, much like the bullshit on the ground in this page. I didn't read Darkwing Duck because I'm not really a Disney person, and I was a little too old to appreciate the Darkwing Duck cartoon, but it is written by Daniel Kibblesmith, and it's illustrated from Brandt and Stein, Ted Brandt and Rose Stein, who are really, really charming people. I love following them on social media, so maybe I'll check out Darkwing Duck, but I feel like it's just gonna like go over my head because I'm just not a Darkwing Duck person, so like I'm not gonna like appreciate what's so great about it, even if it is great. This Day of the Dead Girl by Amy Garcia, AJ Mendez, and Belen Culebras. This is by Magma Comics. It's issue number 4, and it's all on Global Comics. So if you subscribe to Global Comics, you can just read it there and not have to pay for anything. In fact, I don't even think it's for sale on Comixology. I think it's like, if you want to read it digital, just get it on Global Comics, which is fascinating. This set up such a fun arcane mystery in this town with the Day of the Dead festival. This girl comes back to town. She's a medical examiner now, but she has to move back in with her mother. And so like, is there going to be even anything medical to examine in this small town? And it turns out that there is, and there's kind of like a bad wizard who's trying to amass all the things from the good wizards. It's such a cool plot. It had such fantastic art. I think it had trouble sticking the landing because I think it felt a little bit written into a corner to me, that maybe this was a TV show script, which, because I know they're TV writers, and that they wrote so much action into this final one, and they're like, oh, it'll be a great comic because on TV we could like never afford all of this action at the end of a pilot, so we're gonna like have tons of magical action. But then from a comic book perspective, I think sometimes indie creators get so obsessed with the idea that it's a movie with an unlimited budget, but it's like we knew we can, but we never asked ourselves if we should. I don't think the big magical blowout helped this. There was a lot of magical characters that seemed like they had really subtle little powers, like producing a little bit of flame or levitating, that at the end were all of a sudden like having this X-Men battle in a graveyard. And I kind of just like lost the intent of like, I knew who to root for, and there was a sympathetic character, and I did want the villain to be defeated because I think this was a really good series. But I just kind of was like, oh, I was thinking there was going to be like more of a whodunit finale, or there was going to be like a double cross, or there was going to be like it felt like it was going to be more Scooby-Doo. And then to go X-Men from it being Scooby-Doo kind of was like, I didn't really understand. It was still a very fine series. Really, really good interior art. I think this whole creative team is ready to be at Marvel or DC tomorrow. I think this problem they had with this last issue and just like really nailing the landing would be helped by editors and helped by being in the wider pantheon of Marvel and DC stories. So I still came away from this book feeling very positive about it. I just think they kind of missed on the ending a little bit. Dead Samurai, I looked all over and I could not find a way to read this digitally. It's by Wake Entertainment. So maybe it's just on their website. I think when I say I looked all over, I usually mean Global Comics, Comixology, I like maybe Googled it or something. But some of these people who sometimes sell direct digital on their website, I miss out on, but a lot of them don't. Because I think they know that the direct digital copy would probably get pirated and then it would just be on some website and they would lose control over that. But I got to tell you, the pirates don't want to spend time on the smaller books. Like they're pirating Marvel and DC and like Image and Dark Horse. So I don't think that's as big of a problem as maybe they think it is. And they're losing out on all of us who could be reading it digitally. So unfortunately, I did not get to read the Dead Samurai. I really did plan to. It looked interesting to me. Then we come to Death of Power. This is kind of, I'll set the clock here because I do have things to say about this. It's just a weird book. It was a Kickstarter. And it's basically an extended riff on a bunch of classic 80s and 90s comics. Primarily, it starts with the death of Superman. But it's like through this like really twisted indie lens that maybe owes a little something to Miracle Man by Alan Moore. And so I finally found a few preview pages of #1 because one of my friends on social media was buying the issues, finding them physically, which I guess came from the Kickstarter. And it just looks so cool to me. And I love the graphic design of this cover. So I found the issue, and the first issue is basically the Superman versus Doomsday fight, but Doomsday beats Superman with his genitals. So that's a book you really want to read. Death of Power is here for you and you will appreciate it. But after I realized that's what it was about, I'm like, look, I'm a big proponent of like put more dicks in comics. There's plenty of breasts in comics. So why not have more dicks in comics? Like show equal opportunity. So from that perspective, I was like, cool. I mean, we see, that's great. Doomsday, I'm happy that he has genitals, I guess. But I don't need to read that. But some of you might be really entertained by it. Like there's that, isn't there like a manga called like Dick Fight Island? And like people who don't even really enjoy looking at dicks necessarily like it because of the tee nature of that. So it's not always about breasts. And I do enjoy a comic book that realizes that, but that was deeply not for me. Okay, we're going to talk about Doctor Strange of Asgard. Then I'm going to break because I feel like I'm already losing my mind and we're only an hour into the show. And we're going to take some comments. Doctor Strange of Asgard by Derek Landy, Carlos Magno, who I love on art, Espen Grundtjern on colors, and Corey Petit on letters. I loved this. I think with Doctor Strange, again, cover doesn't advertise the interior. And guess what? This cover's not as good as the interior. Well, I mean, it's good. It's by GF Saw. But I would have Carlos Magno draw the cover. The thing with Doctor Strange is it has to be motivated. It doesn't really work if you're just like, magic, and have him do some magic. I don't think those comics work well. You got to define the system and why he's doing the thing that he's doing, because he's so powerful that you can't just have him like stop somebody robbing a museum. There's got to be a reason he's engaged in what he's engaged in. And Derek Landy, who I'm increasingly discovering is incredibly reliable, figures that out early. He's like, well, look, I can't really do anything on Earth right now because by definition, if Doom is the Sorcerer Supreme, I'm not. And so I can't really fight back against Doom. But I could be the Sorcerer Supreme of another realm and gain back power that I can then bring back to Earth to fight Doom. So clever, right? So he's like, I'm friends with Thor. Why don't I go to Asgard? And so Thor's like, yeah, if you can convince my main magician, my Skald, that you should be the Sorcerer Supreme. You could be the Sorcerer Supreme. We're buds. But then it's not just like him at court, courting these people and trying to get their approval. He basically like gets a guide and walks through the streets of Asgard. By the way, this page, holy Jesus. And in walking through the streets of Asgard, he kind of like finds up what's happening out look at the friggin' colors on this candle. My God, what is if this was the interior of the Addy Granoff comics that I bought in 2010, I wouldn't have imprinted on Greg Land, because I love Carlos Magno's. I'll get back to the thing about the story. I love Carlos Magno's art so much. And I feel like sometimes he's using the wrong line weights. Like they have the wrong kind of color that's making his line weights almost look like jittery or stuttery, or they're like putting too much ruddy colors on the characters and it makes them look blotchy. This is the best I've ever seen his art look inside. I, of course, love him from Chip Zdarsky's Invaders, which he was the main present-day artist for. I've never seen his art look like this. It's stunning. Espen Grundtjern's colors, but also Magno's line weights are perfect here. I originally had like 8 pages that I had saved from reading this. I'm like, okay, you can't show 8 pages on the stream. Then we're just reading the comic together. But the thing that I loved, getting back to the story, which you can see there, is that Doctor Strange basically just takes a stroll through the streets of Asgard. And basically Derek Landy does this really smart thing where he's like, well, this is what he would do in New York. Doctor Strange knows what's up about New York. His Sanctum Sanctorum is very much of that place. He's a citizen of New York, right? right? So if he's going to be the Sorcerer Supreme of Asgard, yeah, he's not just going to levitate to the Skald's house to ask her about it. He's going to like walk through the streets and like see what's happening in the streets and meet some people. And it made me really realize we don't see a lot of just like commoners walking around Asgard that much. We kind of did in the JMS and Gillen era when Asgard was on Earth, but it's just not a beat that gets played very much in Thor books. And so I loved that beat. I loved the art. It had a terrific twist at the last page. It's only a 5-issue series during One World Under Doom, but I think I would like this to be an ongoing run. I think Derek Landy had so many good ideas here. So this was one of my favorite comics of the week, and especially after a pretty rough start to the alphabet, aside from Birds of Prey, I was like, oh, hell yes, when I read this. I strongly recommend this. I think it is so clever. It is so gorgeous. Unless you just have no patience for Asgard stuff at all, then it's not going to work for you. But even if you're like mild, like I don't love Asgard, it's not like my favorite setting. Even if you're like okay with Asgard, I just think this is such a smash hit. Oh my goodness. Okay, let's look at some comments and then we'll get back to the books. I'm gonna have to scroll up for a little bit. Okay. Oh boy, you've talked about all sorts of things. People responding on Tariffs a little bit, which I'm not going to get super into. Raging Sloth said, feeling a little bit digital curious, but then feels guilty about your LCS. Well, I would say this. What would you get digitally that you would never get from your LCS, right? Like, what's a book you would never just pay $4 to check out? What's a book that you would binge, but you just don't have the money to binge it physically, but like you could get it on Global Comics or whatever? You don't have to feel like you're betraying your local comic book store just to appreciate something in digital. I don't have a local comic store, so that's easy for me to say, but I would say check it out. Hank wishes that he could enjoy digital, but it's psychological. After spending a day looking at screens for work, I want a break. I get that. I think for me, it's the ability to zoom in on art. Now when I'm reading just a book, and I have so many, that's fine for a read for me, but especially in new comics where I'm like really trying to absorb them and not just read them like novels, but like critique them. If I was just reading it and I couldn't zoom in, I feel like I would just be lost. So that's RAM. James Abel, the page reading Batgirl #5, which I hated. The pages with no dialogues were very beautiful, but the other part was just okay. The story arc is getting old. Oh, see, James and I agreed on that one. Level Code saying, wow, stinky. I mean, who knows what that could be about? Me, my opinions, or maybe one of the comics that he was agreeing with. Cruel Angel, Batgirl, yup, just patting out a 6. Well, I'm happy I'm not alone because I've seen a lot of people saying they like it, and the art, of course, is gorgeous. So I was like, oh, am I being an asshole? Like, am I the only person out here complaining about this? So I'm happy to know that, because I'm going to give you my opinion regardless. Like, I'm going to say the asshole thing that I think, because that's why you're here, presumably, I guess. But it's not that I want to be liked. It's just that, like, I don't want to give my opinion and have that be so off the map from everybody else's opinion. I know I've got a couple of them, but like, it's encouraging to know that I'm not the only person who's feeling how like stuttering and slow it is. Yeah, Edwin, as I was reading it, I was like seething with anger. See flames on the side of my face. Cruel Angel did read Batman Full Moon. It was an okay werewolf story. May have been better without the usual ending, like keeping bats as a lichen or killing him off. And Rodney Barnes, I think Rodney Barnes always does better on indie books because he has the freedom to like do that twist the knife stuff, and that man can twist some knives. So it kind of makes sense to me there. More comments on Batgirl. Well and truly F-bombed. I'll give it a pass then. Well, here's the thing, and I'm trying. Every week I'm trying to make sure I tell you the things that you might like about the comic, even if I hate the comic. If you like spending that repetitive time with her, if you like how silent she is and not comedic, then it's going to work for you. If you like intercutting between like memories and reality in the same panel grouping, then it's going to work for you, right? For me, I hate all those things. Pity Ma saying, breathe, Krisis just plays my pre-order for Tomb of Dracula, one of my favorite omnibuses of all time. I love Tomb of Dracula. And funny enough, it's one of my best performing videos from the original season of Crushing Comics, where I unpacked all the books in my old house. For some reason, I guess I just have like the best keyworded Tomb of Dracula video out there, but that one does numbers compared to all my other videos, but it truly is one of my favorite omnibuses. I love Tomb of Dracula. Okay, here's James with his opinion on Blade Forger. Too many time jumps. What if He-Man and Conan made a comic? You get Blade Forger. I also can't help but see some inspiration from Jason Aaron Thor. Okay, so James Abel didn't love it. He just liked it better than me. He did turn me on to the fact that it did have a Spotify soundtrack, which or I think I wound up finding on YouTube, which the actual comic was not good. It said that it had a music person, but then it didn't tell me where to go. I was like, well, what's then I have to like Google you to find out. Just tell me. Oh no, you know what? There's a QR code, but I'm an old person. I don't have a device that can read QR codes. Shh, we don't need to talk about it right now. So that was lost on me. I need something that says go to this URL. Javier Hernandez, hello. I've been picking up Batgirl monthly because Cass is one of my favorite DC characters, but I'm 100% right. It feels wasteful to have that beautiful art for the story we got. Well, again, I'm happy. Read Birds of Prey if she's one of your favorite characters. Cruel Angel, read Cruel Kingdom, very on brand. Wasn't a fan of any of these stories. I'm glad I wasn't the only one confused at the time. Okay, it turns out I feel so much better about my weekend reading comics, Joel. You're validating my experiences right now. I feel very seen and very heard. I mean, clearly I'm seen because you're here on the stream, but I'm also feeling very, very heard. James Abel did read Darkwing Duck. The continuity is off. Seems like a brand new universe. Good jumping on place for anyone who wants to read. Okay, so it's not like in continuity to existing Darkwing Duck or the cartoon or whatever, but it's pleasing enough, I think, is what I'm getting from that. The Dead Girl 4, the pages that deal with the graveyard with Dia de Muerto were done wonderfully. I feel the emotions from all the characters. Yeah, I think it did succeed in having an emotional payoff, and that felt rewarding. It's just the X-Men of it all kind of got to me, but I would agree. I think that they did earn it emotionally. Cruel Angel also read it. Loved the series. Agreed. Hope the tease at the end means we've got more in the future. I honestly just think that, I mean, they could write Elsa Bloodstone. They could be writing Robbie Reyes Ghost Rider. They could be, well, Zatanna's got Jamal Campbell right now. We don't want to take him off. But there's just so many comics I think that team could do a really, really good job on right now. Logan Wayne asking, did I see that Archie is going to cross over Kevin Smith's Clerks? No, because I don't read Solicits. I think I heard something about Kevin Smith and Archie, and I just didn't like fully digest it. Joey Pfister's heading out. Hopefully you'll be able to catch more of the stream, but thank you for stopping by and sharing all of your opinions about Krakoa. Pity Ma is talking to Cruel Angel. James Abel, Doctor Strange of Asgard. Interesting ideas. Enjoyed the new setting and characters. And with that ending, it seems like Doctor Strange needs to ask Sherlock Holmes for help. But I like Doctor Strange sometimes being a magical detective. I think that really, really works for me. Patrick, if for some reason some of these comics just comments don't want to show. Patrick saying, great start of a new series. Seems like people are really into it. Edward and Billy also like Doctor Strange of Asgard #1. The interior art was really good. I love Carlos Mango. JT White Wolf Vibrant Library just popping in to say, can't watch live today. It's hanging with my wife on our last few days together before the baby girl gets here. Congratulations, JT White Wolf. What an amazing, amazing time. Looking forward to chipping away at the stream during the week, which I completely appreciate and endorse. Lots of people liking Doctor Strange. Hello to you, RemXO. I don't think we've talked it today. And level 87 code, I think I only have highlighted you once today. So excited that the Strange comic is coming back in full force, and I'm happy to have you here as well. Oh, and again, that Batgirl series that's soon to be released in DC Finest. That's like the beginning of Cass Kane having her own series, but it skips the first few issues, which I guess means there's going to be a DC Finest before that. It has some Babs as Batgirl and then some Cass Kane, which is a very weird decision to break it there. But everybody loves that. It was the #2 vote on the DC Omnibus poll last year. It was Tom King Batman #1, Cass Kane Batgirl series #2, and it's coming out in DC Finest. So I've never read it actually, but I'm really, really excited to. The thumbnail of the stream has a lot of disappointed parent vibes as Kid Crisis, but naughty. No, I think that's just my very serious face that I make. I wanted to change it up because that other one is flipped, and always the picture that I use and always makes me freak out because my hair is parted on the wrong side. So I just was looking for someone that my hair wasn't flipped. Patrick, Doctor Strange is officially solicited for 5 issues because it's a One World Under Doom tie-in, but there's a few of these One World Under Doom tie-ins that feel like they could have some legs. So maybe they'll relaunch in the wake of One World After Doom as ongoings. And Lance McNair saying that I finished the DC Finest Legion of Superheroes. Is my favorite DC Finest so far. I realize I love really sciencey teams like the F4 Legions. I have it right here. I'm excited to read it. But I hope you're going to be back for Star Wars. Feel free to just pop in your Star Wars comment early, and I'll highlight it because I'm intensely interested in what you thought of Jedi Knights. Okay. That was a nice little aside. Let's continue. Oh, DuckTales. Woo. Okay, I didn't read this. I'm not a DuckTales person. I mean, I watched DuckTales as a kid, and Kid Crisis loves DuckTales, but I don't, and I'm not a Duck Comics person, so I don't really get anything from that. But the really, now, if that cover reflects the interior, I might read it, but who knows? Who knows? Okay. The Escort #1. This is from Pat Shan's comic company that he's got right now. This is from the like spicier side. And I actually really decided I wanted to read one of those books from last week, the Will Wisps or something like that. It was WW something. And so I searched high and low to try to find a way to buy it, but it had been a Kickstarter. and there's no way to get the digital version. It's not on Global Comics. So that annoys me. I want to read it. I get it. They want to keep it exclusive for their Kickstarter. But yeah, I probably wasn't going to read the Escort, but I really did. That other one looked really cool. It had the girl with the blue hair and the dragon in the background. Girls with blue hair and dragons. I'm there. Okay. Next, Galaxy of Madness. I briefly flirted with reading number 1. This is interesting. It is very hard sci-fi, but it isn't drawn in a very pop 60s cartoonish kind of way, some of which is drawn by Michael Avon Oming. So if you that sounds like a good mix to you, you will love this. To me, I want my hard sci-fi to look hard, and I want my funny sci-fi to look funny, and it was too much peanut butter in my jelly, and I just couldn't get into it. But it's actually like a pretty cool comic. Somebody last week made a joke about the Ripaverse. I don't follow like a lot of comic news or solicits because I'm too busy with my own site. So I truly did not know what that meant. So then I saw this week and I was like, oh, cool. Chuck Dixon, The Great War of Separation. Look at this cool cover. So apparently it's like some kind of comics game. I don't know. I really don't follow these things. I don't know if Chuck Dixon is a bad person or not. I just read the comics when they show up, y'all, and judge them on the comics. So I probably would have read this. Not only could I not find a way to buy it digitally, but I also couldn't even find the cover image in high quality. Like it was just like in a montage on their website of like all the different covers, which at that point I'm like, oh, this is like a marketing scheme. You're just trying to sell like multiple covers to people who like, then I start to get a sense of like who you really are. But yeah, I still have no idea what Ripaverse is. Don't tell me. Let me be surprised. And I still don't know what the Great War of Separation is about. Grimm Tales of Terror. So look, you've heard me be really hard on some horror comics. You've heard me be really hard on some anthology comics. This issue fucking rocked. I loved it. It was one of the best one-shot horror stories I've read in a while because it was so clever and it kept zigging when I thought it was going to zag. Writer Dave Franchini, so smart. Rodrigo Xavier, great artwork. Love the colors from Robbie Bevard. Teller Esposito the letters. It was just really, really well made. It's about this graveyard that has this just this like little structure made of bricks, but everybody calls it the Devil's Throne. And they're like, if you sit on the Devil's Throne, you'll get possessed by the devil. And so this nerdy kid goes to the graveyard one time and he gets convinced to sit on it, which nobody else will do. And then he experiences what comes to him as a result of sitting on it, which is not what he thought he was going to get. I love this because yeah, it had some tropey stuff. When you've got a single issue horror story, you've got to lean on a couple of tropes. It can't be all new, all fresh ideas. Like just to move it along and like reward people over the course of 24 pages, you got to have a couple of tropes that we know. So this had like the nerd kid falls for the smart girl who dates the jock thing. Like, fine. I'm accepting of tropes in this situation because you need them. But it just told a complete story. And then at the end, when things got like really messed up, I was like, oh, wow, this is getting really messed up. It just really pleased me. And it showed me why I read Zenescope comics. Like sometimes they really know how to deliver. And this art actually, and especially these colors, this to me stands up to the normal caliber of the covers of Zenescope. They need to get this art team, who today, Rodrigo Xavier and Robbie Bevard, they need to get them drawing Grimm fairy tales because this interior was amazing. Loved it. Groupies. Oh, I have a very complex relationship with this comic book. Well, it's on Comixology, which means if you have Amazon Prime, you can read Comixology originals for free and not pay for them. I don't have a Comixology subscription at this month. It lapsed, but it actually gives you discounts on books, so I need to renew it because it's like 10% off. I don't know what I was thinking. But anyway, this book is about these 70s groupies, think like Almost Famous, who are following this band that's like just in the process of getting hot. But the band quite unequivocally are vampires. And the groupies never quite see them being vampires. That is the reader, we know they're vampires. And so the groupies are on so much drugs that they like can't figure out if they're vampires or not. And they're so busy sleeping with them that they don't even notice that some of their friends or the other groupies are being killed. Really, really cool concept. Helen Mullane and Tula Lote feel like they're writing like a pitch or like a series of covers. It's really hard to follow the art sometimes, especially because there's so many drugs that you can't even, it's not sequential. It just feels like a lot of pinups and there's no action movement between the panels. And also we've been through like 3 issues now of them tripping on drugs and having sex. There's a lot of sex in it, which Tula Lote draws very, very well. And then somebody dies at the end. And then like the next issue is just the same thing. It almost feels like an anthology about groupies, but they are the same groupies and they are dating the same band. I just think after 4 issues, I would have dropped this if it wasn't for free, but I'm like, hey, whatever. And I like this 70s rock culture. I love that Almost Famous kind of vibe. So to me, it's like a vibe that I enjoy, but I just can't recommend it because it's really hard to follow. And we're 4 issue in and we've just had 4 spooky, smoky, LSD fueled visions of vampire killings. And like, it doesn't feel like there's a plot. So then we come to the Herculoids, which is some kind of property from the WB that Dynamite got the license for. I literally didn't know that. I just thought it was like a random fantasy comic. And I really like this writer, Tom Snigalski, who wrote a lot of Vampirella. So I'm like, okay, fine, I'll read it. First of all, this cover, not reflected in the interior art. And also the second cover, which I went gaga for this cover, by Bjorn Barons, also not reflected in the interior art, but boy, that is really, really cool. So basically this is about this, it's kind of like this planet that's the Savage Land, and there's like a main dude who's kind of like the Khazar, and then there's or He-Man or whoever, and then there's the lady who's like the Shannon She-Devil, and then there's a kid who's adorable. But then they have these like crazy creatures. They've got this dragon with laser eyes. They've got this big stone like golem thing. They have a Triceratops with like this, and then they also have these like little weird, like they're almost like ooze creatures. So it's real. I was like, this is really cool. But then the whole issue itself, first of all, the art, nothing like any of the covers. It's kind of Mike Mignola-esque. I would say trends a little bit more cartoony, which is fine. This is a cartoon, but don't sell me the hyper realistic cover if it's going to just be cartoon. If it's from a cartoon, sell me a cartoony cover. But then also it was really focused on like all of the people who are trying to invade this planet for their resources, kind of very Avatar, but like there wasn't a lot of layer to their personality. So we were kind of just waiting for them to get down to the planet to get eaten. And then it kind of just uses the whole Herculoids as the villains who eat them, which is actually kind of interesting if you think about it. Tom Snigalski knows what he's doing, but just it was kind of a little tonally all over the place to me. Like, is it a funny book? Is it a violent book? Are we rooting for these creatures? Are we actually going to be fighting them in every issue? Which I guess did leave me with some good questions that are going to pull me along. But also the art was like not what I thought I was going to get. So I was left feeling very, that thing. I just was feeling like that. I didn't dislike it. I don't know if has anybody ever heard of this cartoon? I've never heard of it. So it's not like I have any affinity to cartoons. So I'm just left, I guess I'll read one more because I like Tom Snigalski, but it was very strange. Here's another example of just like how cartoony the interior is. And that's by Craig Russo, who I really like as an artist. Colors by Omi Rebelante Jr., I'm not familiar with, and letters by Jeff Eckelberry. But it's just, this is clearly very different from the cover. Also, I don't know if you can see the resolution on my YouTube, but it's got people with no faces. This face is big enough that you could draw eyes on it. I don't like when people have no faces, but I will read one more issue. Hyde Street, I'm not reading from Ghost Machine. It's Geoff Johns' horror comic where there's a street where everybody goes and they get cursed. Immortal Thor I am reading now. Immortal Thor I've been a little bit rough on because I think Al Ewing has just got such a big plot here that it's kind of hard to follow what's happening at any given time or like what the point is, more so than Immortal Hulk, which I think had very clear, titillating, violent, scary things happening in every issue to make it the Immortal Hulk, such that if you kind of lost track of the Green Door aspect of it, that was fine. This was good. This issue number 21, I feel like finally like centered me back on like what really matters. And I felt last issue was good too. So I think we're kind of getting the energy back right now in this arc. And I would like that. So it's got writing by Al Ewing, art from Jan Bezeldua, who I really, really liked here. Colors from Matt Hollingsworth, letters by Joe Sabino. It plays this very interesting beat, which I loved, which is that the Executioner died at one time in the place of Thor. And a lot of times he kind of works as a stand-in for Thor, sacrificing in a way that Thor doesn't, or making a hard decision that Thor won't. So in that, all stories construct reality, especially in this Al Ewing run. And that's what makes Thor immortal, right? There's so many stories about Thor. In that stories construct reality is Executioner Thor. Like if he keeps standing in for Thor and doing Thor things, is he Thor? Which they play out in a fight that's also a rhetorical fight. And also Thanos is looming over it, but not really, because Thanos just represents Thor's looming death. But is Thanos also somehow connected to it? Or is Thor just seeing Thanos as his vision of death? The interplay between him and Executioner here just worked for me so well. It was so interesting. And it really got me like thinking about what it means, even in your life. Like if you're the person who always shows up for one of your friends when their best friend can't make it, or like their partner is like, oh, my partner had work and I really needed like help moving this couch. I'm so glad you made it. At what point are you just their partner? Are you just their best friend? And it really like made me think about how that works here in the real world for us. So it really, really worked for me as a story. This is what I want from Al Ewing. Make me think, but keep it clear enough and linear enough that I can tell what's going on. Jim Henson's Labyrinth, one of my favorite movies of all time, as we've established on the show many, many times before. And I read issue 1 of this adaptation of it from Boom Comics Archaea imprint, which is part of the fulfillment of their Kickstarter for Labyrinth, because they said they were going to do a direct adaptation. It's a direct adaptation. I mean, which is fine. I don't want them to monkey with it. Labyrinth is a classic. But I kind of just was like, okay, this is the scenes from the movie. Thank you. So I will continue. I think I'm going to try to wait for it to be collected or like on Global Comics or something, because it just doesn't, I don't really understand what the point is to read this adaptation of a movie that I know so well. Okay. So I only read issue number 1. I'm just going to pause for a second because it seemed like the internet was getting a little slow there. So I just wanted to check in on chat to see if it's looking a little twitchy. Okay. No, nobody's saying twitchy, but a hello from Jackernaut. Hello to you. I will get the rest of the comments in the future. I just wanted to do that quick hello. Okay, so now we come to JSA. You know, I don't even know if I have it in me to get angry about this anymore. I truly don't. It's Jeff Lemire. What are you doing, buddy? What are you doing? So here's the thing in this comic book. This first page. So this is Hawkman, Carter Hall, and he's held captive. And it gets revealed in the next page, but how are we supposed to know who that is? Look at this page. You kind of can see a little stripe in his pants. It never says his name. He doesn't say anything that says who he is. And also, he says, he asks this girl to explain herself, Kid Eternity, and then she explains herself, and then he says, look, kid, we can do the story later. You just asked for the story. This is what I don't get about Jeff Lemire's writing this comic. Like he won't tell us who any of the characters are, even when you figure it out on your own. Then they have no voice. And then even within a single page, they contradict themselves. They're like, we need Fate's helmet, but who cares about Fate's helmet? It just has the feeling of a story that like doesn't really fit together. The one part of it that almost kind of makes sense is this part with Jade, like trying to put the JSA back together, which makes sense because I'm reading this JSA book for the JSA. So like, it makes sense to me that this part with her part of the plot is the part that works a little bit, but it's just, there's no JSA. I still don't understand what we're reading about 5 issues into this siege on the JSA. It's called Ragnarok as a story arc, so it's a big deal. And I still don't think Diego Orlotegu's art is right for the JSA. It's neither throwbacky nor glossy. I just don't understand who this book is for. If you're a big JSA fan, I ask this every week that this comes up. If you're a big JSA fan, is this appealing to you? Because it just seems like a load of warmed over crap to me. Okay, now we come to the Atom Project. This Justice League, the Atom Project number 3, I've had some concerns about some past issues. This issue paid them off. We love to see it. We love to see a payoff in issue 3 instead of issue 6. This is written by Ryan Parrott and John Ridley with art from Mike Perkins and colors from Adriano Lucas with letters from Wes Abbott. And this has been doing that back and forth time thing that we've talked about in some other books today, which sometimes can be a little confusing because it's actually 3 different periods. It's the oldest period where Captain Atom has lost his powers, the middle period where they're getting his powers back, and then the newest period where for some reason he's a bad guy. This issue drew all 3 together and explained exactly how they connect to each other. I think 3 issues is a perfectly respectable time to do that. It made us realize that he's not a villain. He just doesn't think these 2 atoms are going to fix the problem in a way that he could fix the problem. So it kind of makes sense because it's kind of this project of them all trying to put powers back together, which is the macro, but the micro is if they can't even get it right for Captain Atom, can they be trusted and can he trust them to do what they need to do? Fantastic art. I don't know if I've ever seen anybody color Mike Perkins better than Adriano Lucas. I love his colors on this. Just really bring out the texture and the dynamic of Mike Perkins' art in a way that other colors just totally miss. So I really like this. I generally don't trust John Ridley because I've not read a lot of good comics by him, but I do think this is going into a place that I appreciate. And I appreciate that now we've kind of like sealed up or opened up, I guess, instead of sealed up the mystery box. Now that we're at the end of the 3rd issue and there's room to like follow the plot forward. Really, really appreciate that. And just the art is just so good. So yeah, I'm totally into it. And way to have a cover by your interior artist. Good job. Okay. Because Mike Perkins, I would not say Mike Perkins is the DC house style. Adriano Lucas has become one of the major DC colors, which I love because I love Adriano Lucas. But like Mike Perkins is not your typical comic book artist, so I think it would be false advertising to say have somebody other than him do the cover. So I like that he was on the cover. Juvenile, which I was so hot on when issue 1 came out because it just felt like such an audaciously big idea by writer, artist, letterer, and designer Jesus Orellana. But I think the problem is it is such a big idea that he's just having trouble containing it within this 5-issue miniseries and within every issue of the miniseries. He's having things happen that go by so fast in the comic that need time to develop. And this issue was a perfect example of that. All these kids are off their medication, so their powers are starting to happen, which I love as a beat, very Gen 13, right? And so they are like, we want to learn how to use our powers so we can get out of here before the guards notice. But we also kind of just party and float around and enjoy our powers and have psychic communications and play sports and have fun. So let's drug our guard and do this. So they drug the guard, but then it feels like in terms of storytelling time, because remember what we talked about in the Moment of Krisis last week, space connotes importance in a comic book. If you give it panel space, it seems like it's important. Basically, it feels like 2 minutes go by and then the guard wakes up. They gave him a whole bottle of pills. So I didn't really understand the timing of that. And it also made me realize I didn't understand what their goal was, which I get it. They're teenagers. They maybe just got lost in partying and forgot they had drugged the guard. But it just really took me out of like, what is this comic book about? Like, where are we trying to go? What are we trying to do? What was their goal in that? And also like how much time is actually going by? I still think Jesus Orellana is a genius. I still love his artwork. I love the audacity of this idea. I think he needed an editor. And I think this maybe could have used 1 or 2 more issues because it's just got such a big story. But this one to me was pleasing in the same way that the first issue was pleasing because the big ideas, it was a small story about big ideas, which is why I like the original issue 1, and I think we lost a little bit in issues 2 and 3, is back here. I can't say that I recommend it. I think it's a little too messy. I think you could probably pick it up in trade rather than get it in single issues, but I very much appreciate it, and it's very much my vibe, and I very much will check out the next thing that creator does. I've not been reading Knights vs. Samurai by David Dalmatian for Todd McFarlane Productions. I'm not reading Life from D-List Larry because I'm not a huge Brian Azzarello fan, but if you are, more power to you. However, this was regrettably the last issue of Caitlin Yarsky's Living Hell, which started the year in my top 10 and has not been too far outside of it. She does the script, art, colors, and cover with letters from Clayton Cowles. This was a really, really remarkable series. And I think I would compare this to the Day of the Dead Girl series, where there was a lot to do in this final issue, but it felt very emotionally earned, just like Day of the Dead Girl. And it maybe got a little bit too big, but the way that it got big felt like it was somewhat in keeping with what we know about the story so far. So I wasn't shocked. So was I still a little disappointed that it got as big as it did and it turned out into basically like a kaiju battle to finish out this very personal story between a father and a daughter? Yes. But that kaiju battle in the end still had a very personal moment to close down the series, which it would have felt like we were robbed without it. I love this concept of this demon who doesn't want to be in hell, but didn't ask to be on Earth necessarily, he just doesn't want to be in hell. And he gets drafted into hunting other demons, some of whom are not bad. This particular demon at the laundromat, she's just a seer. She just sees people's fated death in their laundry, and sometimes she tells them about it and sometimes she doesn't. It's such a beautiful, sensitive, funny scene between the two of them that the comic pauses to view and to let us in on before it continues. And that's why I still love every issue of this book, even if I think the ending maybe got a little bit too big for the feel of the book. And Caitlin Yarsky's cartooning, there's very few people who tell as amazingly easy to follow panel to panel story as her in comics right now, based on what I've seen in this series. And so I think that was the other reason that even though I felt like this got a little bit big, a little bit rushed, her storytelling abilities as an artist are amazing. There was one whole sequence with the mother character here that I would have just taken out. I think we could have just saved that for like a sequel. I don't know if we needed it. I don't know if it got us anything. I think I would have rather spent those pages on stuff like this or on the dad, because that'll happen so fast. But again, very, very good series. Highly, highly, highly recommended. What if Mickey and Friends became the Avengers? There's a series of bi-monthly What If Mickey, What If Disney things happening. I'm not a Disney adult, so I derive no enjoyment from this. I'll read one of them eventually, Marvel Unlimited. Have you been reading them? Are they cute? Is it funny? There's nothing attractive to me about the idea of Mickey Mouse as Iron Man. Like, I don't even think I could do the Mickey voice. I was a WB. I was like a Bugs Bunny kid, Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck and like all the stuff with the orchestra, and he dresses up and he fights Elmer Fudd. I may have never watched a Mickey Mouse cartoon or Donald Duck cartoon other than Fantasia and DuckTales. So I have no attachment to those characters. I do have an attachment to Missing on the Moon. This was one of my strong recommendations to you earlier in the year, and I think it's on Global Comics, so it's easy for you to read if you have Global Comics. It's written by Corey Crater. I love that name for somebody who's writing a story about the moon. By art by Damian Cochero, colors from Patricio Del Pesce, and letters by Hassan Otsmane Elhio. The reason I really enjoy this series is because it's always something different, but it's always on the moon. The first issue was this very like sci-fi thriller whodunit. The second issue was a political thriller. This turns into like kind of a dirty cop thriller, but it's all in service of this same story, of this alternate history of what if the moon was originally a Soviet colonized space colony that the Soviets basically default on, and then the United States takes over. Love that concept. I think that, you know, this was the smallest of all three issues, and not in size, but in focus. So I think if you were really delighting in the big sci-fi beats of issue 1 and issue 2 and the big like political upheaval, this one is much more personal. It's much more about double crossing between two specific people. And I could see how for some people that would get a little too small and kind of take them off the path that they wanted the series to be in. But I find that I'm just really invested in the story. I think the world is so smart and so fully developed that I think there's room to go up and down in terms of size and scope of the story, and I'm still really enjoying it. I think it's a really cool book. I'll give myself a minute on this. Apparently things that are in right now: World War II, Angel and Devils, and Dicks, apparently, because the Missionary #1 by Ryan Stegman, I should have known I wouldn't like whatever came out of the brain of Ryan Stegman, because he and I don't vibe necessarily. Issue #1, which I did buy and read from Dust Larceny Distillery. It's about this guy who finds his wife cheating on him in a very specific graphic way with their pastor. And so he gets so angry when he goes to church afterwards that a devil merges with him. He's like, hey, let me in. So he lets the devil in, and it's like playing all of this comedy, air quotes, about the devil being like, I could, like, if you would just let me boss your body around, you would not be such a sad sack loser. So like, of course, it just felt very focused on masculinity. Like it was all about how like this guy's not masculine enough, and the devil's gonna make him, he's gonna be pushier in a bar, and he's gonna say meaner stuff to his wife. And I just don't subscribe to that at all. I mean, hello. So like to make that the reason to connect with your main character, and I get it, that there's not a problem with masculinity. And to a lot of people out there who feel like they want to own their masculinity more, the idea of having a devil come into your body and give you more chutzpah to be masculine is probably a really, really cool thing that you would identify with and like enjoy a comic about, because for me, that is a non-starter. I did not find it that interesting. What I did find interesting is the devil story, basically that there are like an amount of devils on Earth at any given time, which is fine because there's angels on Earth too. But like at this point, they're like starting to really war and rub up against each other. And like, they're starting to be a little bit of a turf war, which look, I'm just a sucker for that. I love it. It's in Spawn. It's in all these, in The Lucky Devils by Charles Soule. I just love that stuff. It's in Hornsby and Halo. But unfortunately, just because the central story is about the masculinity of this guy, it kind of just lost me. And when I looked at the amount of money I was going to have to spend on the second issue on Dustless Larry's website to get it, I'm like, you know what? That was a great one shot. Thanks so much, Ryan Stegman. Okay. I do not like Juniba's Monkey Meat. I read the first issue of the original story. It's like an anthology. You might appreciate it. Remember Next Wave from Marvel? And remember how like it was kind of about the heroes, but it was also about how like the Beyond Corporation was just had their fingers in everything. And it was so comedic, all the products they have and all the things they control and like how comedically evil they are. That's what this is, but it's about a company that's on an island that's farming and serving monkey meat. But there's all these things, all of the same things are true about the company. And so it's just kind of an anthology set in this world with this like Amazon-sized company that sells this monkey meat. It's very like tongue-in-cheek, silly, clever. And it never hit for me. But if you like things on that silly level, you will like this. For me, in this cartoon style, similar to Juniba, I would rather read a really dense ongoing story like Wes Craig's Kea, which I'm addicted to, rather than something as silly as this, but I can appreciate why you would like it. So I'm not like coming out against it. It's just not for me. Moon Knight. We're really moving along today, by Jed McKay. This did not have my new favorite artist on this title, Dev Promalik. It had Domenico Carbone, who I guess is going to be the person alternating with him. I will say, I like that Moon Knight has this tradition now. They have two artists that alternate that are in a similar style, because they did that in the original Moon Knight series by Jed McKay. I don't know that these two artists are in a similar enough style that Rachel Rosenberg can tie them together with art. I will say, Domenico Carbone, great artist, very Pepe Larraz-esque, but he draws all of his characters kind of young in the face. Like even this like bad mobster Asgard guy is like very young in the face. And I side by sided it with the panel from last issue from Jeff Permalik of this guy basically 1 second before this. And he just looked way like older and bigger and more sinister. So that really took me out of it. Plot wise, however, I love this. I love this. It's really playing with the idea of Moon Knight and all of his people being uprooted, not only from the Midnight Mission, but from having a real specific goal and control, and what that means for all of them, and also what that means for Khonshu. Because Khonshu loves when Mark is uprooted to a degree because he has to rely on Khonshu more. And there's this really interesting beat in here about Khonshu being like, well, would I rather help you in this situation, or would I rather you just die so I can bring you back, which gives me more power over you, but eventually I know your human form will degrade if I bring you back a number of times, and like I like you as a plaything, so maybe I'd rather keep you alive. And so there's the story between Mark and Khonshu about that, and then Tigra gets in a yelling match with Khonshu, which I found delightful. And then there's also Hunter's Moon and his relationship with Khonshu. So smart. I mean, this is a Moon Knight run for the ages, and I love how deeply into the character Jed MacKay has dug. And the art again was extraordinarily good. It was just different than the other artists in a way that the alternating artists in the first run, Vincente and Capuccio, maybe, they were so similar to each other that I sometimes forgot that they were trading off. That's not going to be the case if we continue to alternate with these two artists. Moon Man, I didn't really love Moon Man. I think you've heard me talk about it before, that the art, I actually really like the story. From Kyle Higgins and Kid Cudi, we've already established I don't know how to say it, but the art was just too vague, but I keep thinking about it. So I think I'm going to catch up for the next issue, because it's about these astronauts who go to space and they lose 7 minutes, very Event Horizon, and they come back and some of them have powers and they're slowly remembering what happened in the 7 minutes. I'm just a sucker for that. And we talk a lot about the fantasy tropes that I like and the heaven and hell. I'm very much a sucker in sci-fi for we lost some time and we don't know how to get it back. That's one of my favorite sci-fi tropes. We're just going to get to the ends of the M's, I think. Then I'll take another break. So I'm not a Godzilla person. Kaiju is not one of my tropes. But this cover, oh my. Now, I sincerely doubt that the entire interior of this is going to be Art Nouveau influenced and look like Alphonse Mucha doing a Mothra cover, which he's my favorite artist. But I mean, I would hang this on my wall right now. I don't even know who Mothra is. A moth, apparently. The moths in New Zealand are so big because we don't have mammals. We have a lot of birds, but we don't have any mammals that are native. I mean, now I'm here. There's mammals here. But point being that there's some fantastic insects here to feed all the birds. And the moths at night in our house, they are so big and they want to get in so bad that if I have the window shades open and I'm like in here reading comics, typing away, you can hear the moths throwing themselves against the window to try to get in. And it actually is like loud. And next time I'm just going to picture that they're this gorgeous Mothra throwing themselves against the window. Okay. I'm going to take a break before Nice House by the Sea because I'm going to lose my mind talking about it in a positive way. Spoilers. So let's just catch up in the chat real quick. Okay. I'm old. So then, do you like how I look down my nose? Like, because I'm that old. Okay. Oh boy. Oh wow. You guys were talking about a lot of things. Doctor Strange of Asgard. Okay. I remember where we are. Everybody loved Doctor Strange of Asgard. Level 87 code was saying, not I'm stinky. Batgirl sounds stinky. Okay. Well, then we're on the same page. Let's see. Max album and Groupies and Vampire Bullshit I'm Sold. Yeah, Max, you would like it because it's like very like Jimi Hendrix Groupies, almost famous. It's and Chula Loach. I mean, if there's like a top 10 comic artists who draw really sensual love scenes in comics right now, I would absolutely put Chula Lote on that. James Abel used to watch Herculoids. So we now have confirmation that it's real. Cruel Angel also used to watch Herculoids as a kid back in Saturday morning cartoon hour. I just don't remember it at all. But it's funny, like I remember certain things like Silverhawks more from the toys than the cartoons. So I think maybe Herculoids, I just didn't have the toys. Maybe that's why I don't remember it. Max Album and Immortal Thor, good issue, enjoyed, easy to follow. Yeah, I think it's just getting a little too circular. Comics are dope. Hey, my friend, I watched an episode of the Herculoids to try to jog my memory. I vaguely remember seeing it once or twice as a kid, but it's before my time. Lance McNair, one of my favorite things about Ryan North's Thor run so far is he doesn't forget Sue Storm is also a genius and has her doctorate, I think, in like anthropology or archaeology. He shows her nearly as intelligent as Reed, which is how it should be. I love that. Gosh, so many people have things to say about Herculoids, which is good. I asked for feedback. Pitama remembers Herculoids. It's a cartoon I enjoyed when growing up around the Johnny Quest time. I might be a little too old for it, maybe, which I'm really enjoying watching on Max. I just started the comic. So what did you think? Okay, Pity Ma, I'm asking you specifically, but the other people who mentioned it too. Comics Dope, if you're still here, and Cruel Angel, and James Abel. Was the comic, if you read it, accurate to the book or the show? And if you didn't read the comic book, what would you expect a comic of the show to be like? Like, what did they do in a typical episode? Were they always defending their land from invaders? Was it always those like Skrull-looking aliens, or was it all different invaders? Clue me in. Okay, Lance McNair continued. Also love Sue and Johnny's sibling dynamic. Agreed. And this is the best Alicia that's ever been written. Agreed. Like, that's why Fantastic Four, somebody, I said the other day on the Near Mint Kitchen stream that She-Hulk was my favorite Marvel comic of 2024. And somebody was like, I thought you said it was Fantastic Four. Just on the numbers, it was She-Hulk. But I think it's Fantastic Four also to me, because in terms of individual stories and character voices, Fantastic Four just keeps hitting it out of the park. And there's so many issues that like individually stick out in my mind, which is hard to do when I read like 50, 60 issues a week. And that's just new comics. I read old comics too. So I probably read like more, like almost so far this year, almost 100 issues a week. And so it just really, they both are my favorites in different ways. I really prefer Ortega's art in X-23 Wolverine than JSA. Yeah, the thing is, Flavio, thank you for being here, by the way. I don't think I've said hi to you yet. I don't mind his art. I think his art is fine. I think it is just a strange fit for the JSA. Robert Reeves, very mixed on JSA. Starts by hand-waving the end of John's run to get the villains off the team, and I'm tired of seeing JSA fight Suture. Okay, that's context that's good, because I haven't read that John run. So it sounds like there are villains integrated onto the team, and then Lemire was maybe given the edict, like, get them off the team, and he's like, oh, well, if you've read that run, then it'll be great to just roll into this big villain fight, and we'll just hand-wave. But I can see why it's disappointing to you, and it's certainly disappointing to me, but you continued to say, however, I'm happy to see characters like Jade, Obsidian, and Sand being utilized, because outside the side materials, felt like those characters have been largely forgotten. Yeah, I like those Infinity Inc. characters a lot, and I think there's a lot of value to having them, and I think there's so much to do with them because they're not as well defined as the JSA characters, and I think that's what the original generation JSA characters, and I think that's, to me, when those characters are just used for a panel or two and then they're whisked off panel, it's like, that's what I want. I want 2 or 3 of the core, Dr. Fate, Hawkman, and then I want 2 or 3 of the younger ones, and I want to see them moving around, doing stuff, being adventurers together. Beyond Comics, hey, Kiwi friend, kia ora. I like Spicer's colors on Mike Perkins too. I do like Spicer's colors on Mike Perkins, but something about Adriano Lucas is really bringing out like the roundness of his art. Nick N is also reading GSA, and it's been choppy. I chalk that up to the digital aspect. I buy it in trade, and it usually helps make it more cohesive. However, the story is scattered and dry out. Yeah, and Lemire, even when I dislike Lemire, I feel like Lemire, I can usually feel his affection for the characters, and I don't feel his affection here. It feels very like a job he took for pay. I don't feel like there's any one of these characters that he's like lavishing with good development, which even on a Lemire book I dislike, I always can feel that usually, and I don't really feel that here. Bunk is back. Kaiju battles an interpersonal conflict before father and daughter. I need to read this. James Comics. It was living hell. You'll love it. It was Caitlin Yarsky's cartooning is absolutely fantastic. Missing on the Moon, number 3, James Abel read it. Some very good action movement with the art. The issue did move a little fast for me, and it's still very good. Wish I had time to breathe for the characters. Yeah, it did feel like, despite them having that long conversation, that it also kind of felt rushed at the same time. Kind of strange. Bunkmaster confirmed Missing on the Moon is available. Missing on the Moon, very good. Maybe I said that instead of Global Comics. Kid Kuday. I speak French, so to me that's A. Am I saying that right? Kid Kuday. Anyway, James didn't read Herculoids. Haven't watched Herculoids in 10 years, so has no idea. And James, the media answer, what's the best encyclopedia editions to own if you want to keep up with Marvel and DC characters? I don't know. I don't have any of those books. Those like Encyclopedia 2, Handbook 2, that's just my brain. So I'm sorry. That's not what this is. This is more of like a visual style guide to 1982 DC. So yeah, unfortunately, I mean, other people might know. I know they put out, there was that really cool like Anatomy of a Superhero book that DC did a couple years ago that had really cool art, but like, I don't know. I'm here for the stories generally, so I don't really do a lot of those encyclopedia. Kadi. Thank you. Comics are dope. Who's still around? Comics are dope is so cool, y'all. Okay. The great brief chat period. Okay. This issue, so amazing. Look, this series moves a little slowly, and it absolutely reads better, I think, probably in binge and trade than it does as single issues, but I'm so addicted to it that I can't help it. And I think that we're in for a little hiatus because we're at the halfway mark here. But this is Nice House by the Sea, issue number 6, the sequel to Nice House by the Lake. Start there, don't start here. James Tynion, the writer, Alvaro Martinez Bueno, the artist, and Jordi Belair, the color artist. I love the art. What can I say? I'm so stunned. I was speechless about this. One of the main characters in this series is trans. I didn't even realize that at the beginning. I mean, they're introduced as trans. I didn't realize they were going to be a main character. And I think so often to have a trans character, you're either trying to like totally hand wave away them being trans at all and just be like, let's just treat this character as their current gender, which is fine. Or the comics trying to sensationalize something about their transition. But in this case, the character's transition is very important to the plot. And the people that she knew when she was a boy, when she had her dead name, and the relationships she had with them matter a lot now. But they've changed too. And this issue does this brilliant thing about kind of like paralleling her change and their change, except for did they change or did they just reveal themselves? But then did she really change or did she just reveal herself? Such a great, interesting beat, so delicately handled by Tynion. The art is so amazing. And really also there's this like life or death happening. I mean, this issue is basically about Hickman doing incursions. Like think about the end of Hickman's Avengers running into Secret Wars, the incursions between universes. But what if instead of the new Avengers versus the JLA or whoever was in the other universe, what if there were just 10 people? What if somebody just picked 10 people to be in charge of the conversions? Or the who should die? Should we blow up the other Earth or not? Which is not the actual plot of this, but close enough that it's good comparison. And then how different are those groups of 10 people and the cohesion of the groups, and how will the cohesion of the group change as they have to keep making these decisions? Would it be better that people have people who already have relationships to each other, or would it be better to just have people that are unaffiliated to each other that are really good at making decisions? That's what this Nice House series is about. Nice House on the Sea. It's about the difference between the different kinds of groups of 10 people. The original series, the Nice House by the Lake, is just what if we had a group of people that did have existing connections? How would they deal with this apocalyptic scenario? Now we've kind of broadened the lens to look at how would different groups of people deal with the apocalypse. I think I managed to do all that without giving you spoilers. This is my favorite comic book. I know it's number, what was it, 2 or 3 right now in my top 10. That's just the math of what issue is better than what other issue, and like how much I'm loving FML right now. But if I every time I read one of these issues, I'm like, I want to just drop everything I'm doing and reread this whole thing. The only other comic I can say that about that I can think of is Lazarus. Every time I read a new issue of Lazarus, I'm like, I'm just going to reread this whole thing. And I will when the 4th hardcover comes out. That's how much I love this comic book. All right, let's keep grooving. And also the art. I really love, we talked about a lot last week about paneling that makes bad use of negative space, undirected use of negative space. Martinez Bono uses amazing use of negative space to like move your eye around to the page, draw you to where he wants to. There's no mistake, right, that this whole side is meant to squeeze our characters to one side. You could argue, oh, well, why not use more of the page? But like it's being used with intent, as opposed to, I really get angry when comics just use panel spacing willy-nilly and there's like no reason that it's drawing your eye back and forth. Here, he's very deliberately using it a lot of times to like almost reflect the architecture of the space that the story is being told in. Brilliant. NYX. So, you know what? I was thinking about when there's a direct crossover with multiple chapters in the same week, should I like do them all in a row? But these stories work so individual from each other that even though this is chapter 2 of the story, I think we can just do it here. This was a special kind of terrible because I'm learning that Kelly and Lansing do this thing where they like seem like they're really up on the continuity of something and they're like pulling all these deep cuts of continuity, but then they get something like fundamentally wrong or they like miss something. And so you get excited at first. You're like, oh, this has deep cuts. And then it's like, but this doesn't make any sense. Actually, they did it on their Cap. They did it on Outsiders, and they're doing it here. Professor Xavier wants to is broken out. That's what X-Manhunt is. And he wants to find his Krakoa helmet so he can go and do his MacGuffin thing, which we'll talk about more when we get to Uncanny X-Men. So he comes to these students in NYC, except for he has no relationship to any of these students. He was never the professor of the school during the period that any of these students were students. I mean, I guess they all like kind of trust him a little bit from Krakoa, but given how things ended on Krakoa, they don't even trust him from that. So it just felt like it rang really false here that like he was like trying to get them on his side and that he was like asking them to do a mission for him and that they would even do it. Like it just didn't, I mean, I guess I can forgive them a little bit because all these characters had a relationship to him on Krakoa. And he was a big part of Krakoa, and this whole book is about reflecting on what it was like to grow up in the paradise of Krakoa and then being thrust out into the cruel, cold world outside of that. But it just, as a story, it didn't make any sense. None of these characters to me are characters that would really have an opinion about Professor Xavier. I love the art from Francesco Mortorino. I wish we could have had Francesco Mortorino draw some of the issues that he skipped earlier in this series that were actually about the core of this plot instead of this random nonsense crossover issue that you could have any artist draw. I mean, it's not a surprise that this book is canceled. It doesn't feel like it's about anything. It doesn't feel like we have a main character. Like, okay, Mojo is there. I mean, it was fun to see Mojo and Professor kind of knock heads for one page, but it just feels so pointless and lost at sea. And again, we have a comic book where the ostensible main character, or one of the two main characters, X-23, is also in her own individual comic book, and she's also in Wolverine, and she's also in Women of Marvel, which I get, and I'm happy that Laura Kinney is that exciting and beloved now that she can be in 4 different comics, but it makes it feel like there's no real point to this comic. Sorry. I wish the X-Men books were good. It gives me no... So Penthouse has comics out. This cover is really... I mean, I love like the hip panniers and like the... I mean, not just for the TNA aspect of it. I just love the costume design aspect of it. I would have read this. Penthouse, I think it's become a joke like, oh, I get Penthouse or Playboy for the articles. But in the 70s, you did get them for the articles. I mean, not just the articles, but like a lot of the big writers, the big thinkers of that time were writing for those magazines and for Rolling Stone. Like, people like Hunter S. Thompson, right? So like the idea that Penthouse has its own brand of comic books, I was actually really intrigued to see, like, were they all just going to be like sexy stories, or was there going to be like big thinking? Like, it would not surprise me to see like a Hickman caliber of person doing like a really thoughtful story in Penthouse Comics, or as a comic book is the brand so much like that it's about TNA that that's just what it's going to be about. I don't know. But anyway, couldn't find it digital, wasn't on Comixology, so I'll never know. Now we get to Poison Ivy, and I've been a little hard on this title the past couple months because it's just been a lot of walking and talking, a lot of talking. Well, this issue by G. Willow Wilson and a guest artist, Brian Lovell, but the same normal colors keeping consistency, R.F. Pranto, and letters by Hasan Otsumane. It really, really worked for me because it gave finally a thing for Poison Ivy to get through, which is that she really wanted to try to figure out what is going on with this like swamp town where she is. Like, what was its story? Why is it affecting her the way that it is? Why is it so inviting to her? And so she has to bring back her nemesis, this orchid-headed guy from a previous arc, to come and help her with it. So of course there's a tension between them, and the tension is throughout the issue, but then the colors are great throughout the issue, and also we do really learn something. So it felt like it had something that the past few Poison Ivy issues were missing. Like it had conflict, it had her with a very specific goal. It felt like it gave us information. So it really broke us free of what felt like 3 or 4 issues of just talking. There was this, and I told this really kind of chilling story about development and man trying to kind of like develop nature where they're not supposed to be. Like, can you develop a bog into a city? Well, no, the bog's going to fight back, which is such an interesting story about climate change. And Poison Ivy isn't involved in this part of the story at all. It's just what the bog naturally did, which has a supernatural element to it, but it is reflective of what happens when people are trying to develop land that just is inhospitable to development. If you're building a town in a desert, you're always going to be water poor. You're always going to be using tons of energy to cool that land. If you build, land on a swamp or a bog, like, you're always going to be below sea level. And so that part of it was so interesting to me. There's this one thing I just have to point out and laugh. Poison Ivy is in bed with her sometimes side piece. I think her name is Pam from HR. Here in this panel, she's clearly taking off her shirt and there's nothing beneath the shirt. So then when she leans in here, I think the intent was to have side boob, but shadowed. But clearly DC editorial was like, could you please go on and draw a shirt? Because she's got a shirt on there and she doesn't have a shirt on there. I thought it just made me laugh. I'm not reading the Powerpuff Girls by Amanda Daybert, but they do look adorable. What lovely, powerful. I almost read Rick and Morty Spring Breakout this week because I do find Rick and Morty funny and I love James Asmus. I'm like, well, I can't. What Marvel DC? Maybe he doesn't want to work for Marvel and DC. Maybe he's annoyed with them. I don't know. But I love James Asmus. I just was so busy, and as you saw, just barely made it to the show. So that I did not read. I did read Sam and Twitch, and this was a good issue of Sam and Twitch. Todd McFarlane. Good job, Todd. Todd McFarlane plot, script by somebody other than Todd McFarlane, Jordan Barrell, maybe that's why I liked it, with art from Thomas Nailchik and colors from FCO Placencia and color flats by Sheila Saldana. Yeah, it was good. It followed Sam instead of following Twitch, and Sam basically like has this connection to all these drug dealers in the area, and so they're trying to figure out how is it that Twitch killed this guy that was already dead and had all these drugs in the system. How can you kill a guy who's already dead? And so Sam, while Twitch is like getting too deep, Sam is like, oh, well, I'll just follow the drugs. And so this is a very, very clever issue of him following the drugs. And Tom Orzechowski's letters really work here for me, probably because there were so many dark environments that this idea of like no letter balloon lettering really, really worked here, where I think it struggled the past couple of issues. And Sam, you know, this book works the best when it shows the dichotomy of Sam and Twitch and why they work as two partners together, and it's been very Twitch centric for like 10 issues now. So it was really, really fun to get Sam just letting loose and being an asshole and shaking down a bunch of drug dealers. And I found that I was really engaged with it. This book is a great police procedural when the plot is tight. And I think that Todd just needs somebody else along with on the ride with him sometimes to keep the plot tight. Now we come to Scarlet Witch number 10, which is the last issue of the Scarlet Witch series, but don't worry, it will be back in just 2 months as the Vision and Scarlet Witch. Why does she not have top billing? Because historically that series has always been called the Vision and Scarlet Witch, and this is like an anniversary of that. But let's talk about this issue. Steve Orlando writing, art from Jacopo Camagni, but also one really beautiful spread by Russell Dodderman, and finishes from Elizabeth D'Amico, but importantly for me, colors from Frank Williams, whose colors I really, really like. I don't think he's coloring the next series. I think he's a remarkable colors because he does these really beautiful, like kind of like almost flat, obvious colors with not a lot of like shininess to them, which really, really works. I will say this kind of, again, for the second issue in a row, got a little Disney cartoony for me from Jacopo Camagni, which I like, but I don't love as much as some of the other artists in the series. But I think Orlando succeeded, and that he built another beautiful arc with lots of one-shot stories that had a big crescendo that finished the arc, even though the arc was of one-shot stories. This story of Amaranth like really, really worked. Wanda kind of intuiting something about Amaranth's powers and how she came to be as this magically nullifying person really, really worked. And it worked that it ended not as a happy ending, but an ending with a different kind of resolve. I think this is probably the best comic that Steve Orlando has worked on. I think he does really great things with Wanda. I think it's very enjoyable. It's a little bit on the light and fluffy side. I think it's gotten fluffier over time. I think the first 5 issues of that original series from like 2022 or 2023 was a little bit more heavy and specific to Wanda. And now it's getting a little bit lightweight and dare I say slightly silly, but I still think it's a very, very good series. And if you like the Scarlet Witch, even if you don't generally like Steve Orlando, you should give it a try. Secret Six. I should preface this with, I have no history with Secret Six. I've never read it because I've never done a guide for it. So usually the only way I read any DC from before New 52 that I didn't already know from the 80s or 90s is if I make a guide. So I don't know anything about Gail Simone's Secret Six, but this is Nicole Main's Secret Six. Nicole Main's, of course, is the actress that acts Dreamer on the CW, and now she's just a comic book writer for DC, writing comics with Dreamer. A lot of times they pair her up with a co-writer. I think she's way too good for that because this is her on her own, and it was spectacular. Also, Steven Segovia, who I've been loving on Spawn Universe, colors from Rain Barreto, who I enjoy, and letters from Steve Wands. This was really good. I felt like it dealt with things that were so confusing about John Kent's relationship to his boyfriend that really kind of never landed for me that much before. I think was written well here. I think John Kent's burgeoning friendship and maybe something more ship with Dreamer was handled really, really well here. I think, you know, Dreamer is a trans character. This was not about her being trans. It's never textual, but there are 2 specific moments that kind of like, if you know that about this character and care about that of this character, had special significance during the course of the issue. But I really like that she and Superboy and Superboy's boyfriend Jay all have very specific beef with Amanda Waller. And so the idea that Waller is being imprisoned makes them all happy. But is she being treated fairly in prison? Is she being kept in prison? Or is she actually already putting her next plan into place? That is a great reason for these 3 characters to be together. And they create a great triangle of tension because John Kent loves them both. And again, there's this like constant hint of, is there flirtation happening with Dreamer? But then also Jay, his boyfriend, has a reason specifically to hate Dreamer because she was roundaboutly involved in the death of Jay's mother during Absolute Power. So we've already got 3 of our Sinister Six, and then we add 2 more in a really pleasing way, including 2 that we would have known from previous runs of Secret Six, I gather, although I've never read them. I'm totally in for this. Segovia's art here, I think he's drawing in like a different style than I usually see him. It didn't even read to me as Segovia art, which is not a problem. But I was like, wow, like Segovia really leveled up. The colors are really, really good. The voices were great. It kept me engaged. Like the interpersonal relationships work. I think we've got a hit on our hands. And I'm like excited to see Nicole Maines and stretch out. I think to this point, they've been just handing her little pieces of Dreamer, little parcels of Dreamer, Dreamer in a one-shot issue, Dreamer in a Pride Month issue, Dreamer in a miniseries that has to tee up Absolute Power. Here she's just going to get to stretch out and just write a comic book that's a comic book. And I'm really, really excited about that. Shazam, the last issue of this truly, truly charming series. I I had trouble with the first arc because it was a little cynical, but after that, I loved Mark Waid's run, and I really love Josie Campbell's run. I think she has really scored some major fandom for me where I will follow her onto some other titles because this was so well done. I love the voices. I love the heart. Pencils from Dan McDade, which is a little cartoony, but Shazam, let it be cartoony. It should have the feeling of a kid's book. Inks from Robert Poggi, colors by Trish Mulville, letters by Troy Pateri. This just was really satisfying and really fun. It really got to the heart of the characters, and it got to show them get double-crossed and then double-cross the double-cross and then double back cross in a way that felt very Scooby-Doo, which to me is like the high water mark of like, is a book funny and cartoony and engaging for kids? Is like, does it have Scooby-Doo energy? This had Scooby-Doo energy, and it was really, I just loved it. It just makes me like emotional how much I love it. And I took the unusual step of pulling a doubles page spread here because I wanted to read you this monologue from multiple characters. It's such a good monologue. And I'm going to have to make it bigger because I'm half blind. Maybe we'll go full screen on this. Full screen? Let's go full screen. Oh, that doesn't work. Oh, because I don't actually have it in that arrangement. All right, we're not going full screen. But, oh, you know what's funny? Those who fight for control the most know what to do with it the least. Sound familiar? You fought so hard. And for what? Not to build. You've made no progress, no art, no community. The only thing you've done is sit on a throne feeling better than us. Sound familiar? You could have been amazing. You could have shared your knowledge, thousands of years of it. You could have ended hunger or helped build cities or pioneered a new world, one where everyone could step into the future together, hand in hand. If you'd extended your hand, we would have built a place for all of society, but instead you chose to hate. Don't you get it? It's the groups founded on cruelty. They never win because when the only thing holding you together is fear and greed, looking out for number one always becomes the better choice. And it's not going to be the thing, it continues from there, but what a great monologue. And it doesn't feel preachy. It feels like the things that these kid characters would actually say to villains that are like trying to oppress them. Like, you had the chance to make our world better, like out of the mouths of babes. But here you are just trying to use that for divisiveness. But it's because when you approach ruling with the idea of I'm ruling for me, of course, you're not going to make the world better, but you're also ultimately going to fail. What a great message to read in this time right now. What an adorable comic book. What a great round of Shazam. I love it. And I'm looking forward greatly to whatever Josie Campbell's next work will be. And also I need new glasses. Okay. This Sister and Peter. So I saw at the top, I guess I'll start the timer. I saw at the top, it said from the world of Ghost. And I was like, oh, I love Ghost. Thinking it would mean Dark Horse. I saw the Dark Horse logo and I was like, I love Dark Horse Ghost from the world's greatest comics from the 90s. Kelly Sue DeConnick, I think, wrote it at some point. It's been around forever. I always want to pick up the trades. I was like, oh, great. No, not that Ghost. Not that Ghost. Different Ghost. A band. Some Euro metal or something band called Ghost. That I guess they have a song or an album or something about this character, Sister Imperator. It says created by Tobias Forge, script by Karina Beko, art by Poost, and colors from Thiago Roca. Here's the thing. It's a story all about this woman who's been super, super abused and then later comes back and kills her abuser, which I'm okay with. I like seeing a lady get her comeuppance. There are just too many points in the story that didn't really make any sense to me. Like, at one point her father gets killed and she sees him gets killed and she tells her mom and her mom's like, of course not, which, okay. But then there were so many others. Like at one point, like her two little sisters disappear and the mom is like, of course you kidnapped them. It just didn't make any sense. So I think like to build this big dramatic pile of events about how wronged this girl has been in her life. And I get very bored by stories that are like just about all the bad things that happen to a character, like Great Expectations. I get very bored. So to do that, but then to do it in ways that like didn't suspend my disbelief, or I couldn't suspend my disbelief. Eventually I just got tired. And then there were just a lot of beats like that. But even if you don't know these ghost people, if you want to read a book about a femme fatale and how she became a femme fatale in a very similar way to that Doll Parts book, but not as graphic as the Doll Parts book, this could work for you. And the art actually was really, really good. I just, at the end, I didn't feel like I was having any fun, but I think it was well told and well written and well put together. I just wasn't having any fun. And since I don't know this property, I'm not going to stick around for more. I don't read Space Ghost, Spectacular Spider-Man. Spectacular Spider-Man started out so strong, and then I've hated it so much because it's so damn focused on this side character, Elementary, that Greg Wiseman, the writer here and the creator of Gargoyles, has made up. And it feels like so many issues in a row have been about Elementary, training Elementary. It's called Spectacular Spider-Man. Let us follow the Spider-Man, because you know what? This issue at least spent half of its time following Spider-Man. And surprise, it was great, because Greg Wiseman is really great at Spider People. He writes good Spider People. Emilio Laszlo draws amazing Spider People. He's one of my Lazo rather. He renders some of my favorite spider suits. This Spider-Man suit, and the way that it's colored here by Edgar Delgado. You've heard me complain when the shine is on just one panel of the suit like it's metal. No, this is how the spider suit is supposed to be drawn and colored. And I also like the way that he draws the texture on Miles' suit. And also this issue was funny. It had good quips. It had both Spider-Man fighting against both Electros, and then also Dr. Connor shows up with a different lizard in tow. So it's two Spider-Man versus two Electros versus two lizards. That's what I want from this book. Show me fun team-ups. Show me fun moments. Show me fun action. Show me quips. Show me flips. Show me suits. I love it. This was great. It was the first issue that I think I've felt every bit as good as the first issue. It still had some stuff with Elementary, but it was fun because it actually was about not just training the superhero again and again and again for like 5 issues. It was about this little community of people that the two Spider-Men have found in this coffee shop that they both frequent when they go on patrol together. And for that reason, the Elementary stuff worked because it was grounded in her humanity and not the fact that she's a new superhero. Love this issue. I cannot say that I recommend this book because it has been so incredibly bad for a whole year after that first issue. But if it could do more of this, it would be my favorite Spider book again, because I want this from a Spider book. Okay. Spider-Boy. This may surprise you, but I am obsessed with this comic book. It is a hair out of my top 10. I think it is absolutely brilliant. I think this is the best comic book Dan Slott has written in many years. Nathan Stockman's art was incredible. I love the colors from Eric Arciniga, great letters from Joe Caramagna, but let's talk about why. Because this Spider-Boy, he's allowed to be a kid, and he's having kid problems. He gets back from his arc with Daredevil where they're in Madripoor to find out that Boy Spider, who's like the other half of his genetics, has taken his place and his mom hadn't even noticed. So is he like angry about that to beat him up to be a supervillain? No, he's angry about it because his mom is spending time with this other kid. He's angry about it because this kid is spending time with his friends. He's angry about it because this kid is using his favorite school supplies. It feels like a book about a kid. And then as they continue to like move through this issue and the mom is like, well, you're gonna have to get along. That's a funny beat to play, that this kid has this like genetic duplicate brother and they've got to learn to be twins now, and they're fighting over like who should get to be Spider-Man and who should get to hang out with their mom and who should go to school. That's funny. And it sets up a conflict here that feels like the right size of conflict for a kid character. I really think with this and Shazam, there's a reason for us as adults to be reading comics about kids. You can have kid heroes that are funny and that are charming, and that we've all been kids, so we can all identify with their problems when they're written as kids and they're not just being used as stand-ins for older characters. This comic is brilliant. The cartooning in it isn't brilliant. The story is funny, and it still has like a little bit of a moral and a little bit of a cheerful ending, but it's a high enough quality book that it's better than the majority of the rest of Marvel's line. And I just find it so charming. And like, don't age up these characters. Let Spider-Boy be 10 years old forever, right? Like, I hate that they aged up Miles Morales. Like, yeah, he's older now, and I guess we like it because he could be like romantic or whatever, but we don't need to age up every character. Let Spider-Boy just stay Spider-Boy forever. This is a character that I'm very happy to have be a part of the Marvel Universe. Speaking of characters in the Marvel Universe that I may or may not be happy about, now we come to Stephanie Phillips' Ghost Spider, with art by Paolo Villanelli and colors by Matt Mills. So let's start with the positive here. I think on this run, we are seeing the makings of a new Marvel art star, and Paolo Villanelli, he handles everything in this. He handles physical fights, he handles sci-fi, he handles Loki monologuing, he handles Spider-Gwen spidering. He's really good. He's really, really good. The plot, so look, this issue, what are we in, 10? This issue 11 finally resolves why this book exists and how Gwen wound up in the 616 at the beginning of the series, which, like, okay, 11 issues, Stephanie Phillips, really? Maybe you can afford to do that in your amazing indie book, Grimm. But at Marvel, like, you got to pay us off. But okay, the payoff is happening. But as part of that payoff, Loki, it's a great reveal. I mean, I will say that she had a very good story engine buried underneath here all this time, making its way to 11 issues. But in order to like tease out that reveal and to play with Spider-Gwen, Loki makes her go like intergalactic and brings her to space. And I'm just like, that's not what I want from Spider-Gwen. Like, I get it. And I don't think The entire arc, I hope, is going to be about that. I get that it was a device to reveal the thing that is powering this plot, but it's just so exhausting. Like, why? There's nothing about Spider-Gwen that feels true to who she is and who that character is that we're going to find out with her, like, you know, negotiating a fight between two aliens on an alien planet. She's not a Jedi, okay? So all the things we love about her sarcasm, her relationship with her dad, her as a drummer, none of that's going to come through in this plot. Which is not to say that every plot has to be about her drumming and arguing with her dad or whatever, but like, it just feels like this book never has figured out who this character is. And even after this big reveal of the big plot MacGuffin that's been happening, which is a very good reveal, it still doesn't know who the character is. So it's spending the wrong time doing the wrong things, which is the same problem Stephanie Phillips is having on the Phoenix comic. I did not read Spider-Man Homeroom Heroes. This is an all-ages Spider-Man series. It's been on hiatus for like 4 months, I think, because they wanted to put out all of the Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man miniseries, which came as a prologue to that cartoon on Disney. They wanted to put that out all in a row, and they didn't want another all-ages Spider book in the market competing with that at the same time. So they basically started this and then paused it, released all of that, and then came back to this. I did not read it. But I didn't read Squish and Squash from Keenspot, but apparently now I'm on the hook to start checking out Keenspot comics. Finally, I get to talk about Star Wars Jedi Knights. I hope Lance is still on the stream. So I am on the record as recently as last Thursday on Near Mint Condition saying that Mark Guggenheim has never written a good comic book. So since he is the writer of this, along with artist Madibek Musabikov and colors from Luis Guerrero and letters from Clayton Cowles, I assumed it was going to be terrible. Well, no, it wasn't. It was actually one of the most thrilling Star Wars things I've ever read. Now, granted, I like prequels and I like Jedi, and Guggenheim is benefiting from having Jedi that we really know and love here. Yoda, Mace Windu, Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan. But he had X-Men that we loved in X-Men Gold, and that was crappy. There's just something about how he's writing these Jedis, maybe because they're from iconic characters of screen, and because he is primarily a TV and screenwriter, so like he knows how to write for these characters in a way that didn't really work for X-Men. But also, I think a lot of the heavy lifting is from Musabikov on art. The art here is phenomenal. The likenesses are there without it being slavishly adherent to the likenesses. So you can tell who the Jedi are if you remember them from the prequels, but like, it's not like he's just tracing their faces out of things. This is set slightly before the prequels, and it really shows a lot of great things. It shows how formidable of a Jedi Mace Windu is. It shows how formidable the leader Yoda is, but it shows that they are still prone to errors, and an error happens in this issue, and that error, that kind of sets up the problems they get into in the prequels. Also, it has a very young Obi-Wan who's still very much in training here, which is really delightful. I loved this. It's a perfect comic book. The art is amazing. I love the plot, and it was a one-shot plot, which I love, just showing how these two different planets or peoples that were at war with each other, the war was not all it was cracked up to be, and it took all of the Jedi kind of doing their own things to figure that out. So it kind of had a positive message that when they work together, they can succeed, but it had the seeds of a negative message that like, this is also how they're going to not work together and not see all of Palpatine's plans in the prequels, and it's going to eventually splinter and result in all of their deaths. This feels like a book that could have 100 issues to me. I love the Jedi just as this very cool peacekeeping corps that like go and do stuff. And these are the most well-known, the most beloved, the most toyetic Jedi. And this book was a slam dunk 5 out of 5 perfect Star Wars comic book. And honestly, it's set far enough before the prequels that it really feels like there is room for it to run like 50 issues. So like, I hope that's what we're doing, because I was into it. Okay. Should I take a break? We're still close to the end of the alphabet. We're like 15 comics away. I think we're just going for it. We're going for it. Okay. This is Storm. So this is really interesting because Maria Iodell has never had to do a crossover issue before, and this was the 3rd chapter in X-Manhunt. But X-Manhunt, I'm discovering, is really just an excuse to have Xavier in each one of these comics in succession. There's no real story. Why would there be a story? Why would Tom Brevoort try to have his authors tell a story? Who knows? So instead, this is just basically Storm talking to Xavier and then Storm having to fight Cyclops' X-Men. It is highly entertaining. We have Luciano Vecchio here, who has leveled up so far beyond any form that he previously had that you wouldn't even recognize this compared to his art on Magneto Resurrection from a year ago this month, which was already a level up so vertically from where he had been before. This guy, like every comic he does, is just so much more intense than the last cast. Also, Maggot on panel. So look, mostly this was just an excuse to show Storm having a really good conversation with Xavier, and then Storm having a really brutal showdown with Cyclops' team. Story-wise, some of that didn't totally track for me, especially to have Magic fighting Storm and not to like make a bigger emotional beat about it. Out of it, kind of felt like a little bit of a miss. But just in general, this didn't feel as heavy with plot as all of the Storm issues up to this point have felt, which maybe was a little bit disappointing because Storm has been such a major hit of a book. And this just feels like it was a mandated crossover, and Ayodele had to figure out some way to make it work. And so the way he made it work was to have Storm fight Cyclops. It didn't feel super motivated, but it was beautiful to look at. And the writing of Storm in it was great. I still think this is the best X-Men title by leaps and bounds. It just wasn't as thrilling as some past issues of Storm have been. I'm not reading Teen Titans Go, but this is a new #1 for Teen Titans Go because they have a new season of their ongoing television series out. And so DC had just been doing OGNs all this time when the show has been on hiatus, but now they pulled out of doing the OGNs to have individual issues again to go with the show. I did read Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Night Watcher, which is the side series about one very significant supporting Turtles character, which I won't spoil, but will be obvious if you know the character when I show the art. This is written by Juni Ba, that same writer and usually artist that did Monkey Meat that we talked about earlier, but this is just him as the writer. It's a very, very good monologue. And that's what it is. It's basically like an issue-long kind of conversation that turns into a monologue from this character who one of our main character has just defeated in the prior issue. And so generally the theme of this book is that there's this Night Watcher armor that had been defending some parts of New York City while the Turtles were kind of AWOL, and that this supporting character runs into the armor and then sometimes wears it, but the armor still also has its like own autonomy. And right now that character is separated from the armor, and there's kind of the idea to need to bring it in, but the armor on its own is almost like a kid. Like it's lost, it's alone, it doesn't know what to think, it feels like it's being used. And so she's got to decide how to like make contact with the armor and reconcile if using it is ethical, which is so interesting. But I just felt like this issue lingered so long in this conversation that like it didn't get us anywhere plot wise to explore that ethical dilemma, which I think is a Juni Ba problem. I think this has been a very philosophical series, and every issue of it has been very interesting philosophically. I don't know that it's got a lot of plot that's interesting, which is a shame because it feels like there's a lot of interesting plot to mine, but it's been strong and the art has been strong in it. I just feel like it's not clicking as hard as it should be clicking. That art, by the way, is by Ferro Pay with colors from Luis Antonio Delgado. Okay. Now we have The Terminator, which I'm not reading. It is by Declan Shalvey. Also, Declan Shalvey's Thundercats. How can you make Thundercats boring? Apparently, being Declan Shalvey. I read a few issues of this because I love Thundercats so much, and it was just too boring. It was so boring. And now there's the whole Thundercats line, and it physically pains me to not be reading it and collecting it because I love the Thundercats so much, but it's so boring. Tin Can Society is in my top 10 this week. How? Why? What is happening here? So I skipped it because I saw it was from Giant Generator and it's by Rick Remender, and Rick Remender's cynicism just sometimes is too much for me. But you'll notice Rick Remender is not credited on this cover. He is one of the originators of this story, but it's written by Peter Warren. It's got art from Francesco Mobili and colors from Chris Chukri and letters from Jackie Marzan. First, we got to just start with this art because the cover team is the interior team. This artwork is, I don't know if anybody in comics is doing art that looks as good as this Mobili art, interiors, and the colors. I mean, it's very rendered. It's very grounded in the real world. There's a real world book. We'll talk what it's about in a second. But it's just really, the characters have very distinct likenesses. The action is easy to follow. It very easily pivots from real people to like this suit of armor. I found myself gasping at how good the art was in every single issue. I know it's a specific trope kink of mine that I like hyper realistic art, but if you accept that that's something cool and you enjoy it too, I don't think anybody's doing it better than Mobili right now in comics. It's so beautiful. Then we can talk about the story. I'll give myself another minute since I was an art freak out because I caught up in 6 whole issues. So it starts off with this character. He's very much a Tony Stark character. He has a permanent disability, and part of why he invents this Iron Man-esque armor suit is to help him compensate for his disability and move around the world. But then he also gets to be a superhero. And not really spoilers because it's literally the first page panel, the first page of the first issue. He gets brutally murdered and his suit is MIA. So it turns out that he had these 4 very close friends that he grew up with as a kid, and that all in their own way, separate from each other, were part of this Tin Can Society with him. He's not the Tin Can. It's totally different, but it's very clever, where they had each in their own own way a hand in him becoming this superhero. Maybe one of them was an inventor with him. Maybe one of them was his lover. Maybe one of them was his sidekick. Maybe one of them was kind of the person who cleaned up his messes, right? But none of them fully realized how much the rest of them were involved. But when he dies, they all have to get back together, as friends do when a friend dies, to talk to each other and grieve. And they start to feel out how interconnected they've all been with his life, and they realize they all have a slice of the information they need to know to figure out who killed him and who might have the suit. It is a really good mystery. We're on issue 6 of 9 right now, and this one made me gasp like at least 3 different times. The cliffhanger at the end of issue 5 was so good. I will say issue 6, if this had been as good as issues 1 through 5, it would have been probably my number 2 comic behind FML. This issue got a little bit stupid once or twice because it had a fight with some really silly fight choreography that I get. It made me laugh, but it kind of took me out of it because it just didn't feel real and motivated for the characters. It felt very much like a funny sequence in a book that has actually not been that funny. So for me, this was just like a little softer than the past couple of issues, but oh my goodness, it is really remarkable. I think it's really, really well done. I think the story is really clever. I think the characters are really well characterized. I think it's a brilliant, brilliant comic book from Peter Warren, Francesco Mobili, and Chris Chukri. Really, really great stuff. Highly, highly recommended. I cannot wait now to keep up with it monthly and read the final 3 issues. Two-Face. This was an interesting character study that went by in a flash. I think I read it in like 2.5 minutes. Christian Ward does do an interesting thing here. He basically says that Two-Face has always been a part of Harvey Dent, and that it stems back to his youth. It stems back to falling off his bike. It stems back to his parents' divorce. It's always been the way that he's dealt with the horrors of life. But when the worst horror happened and he got that acid thrown in his face, his personality fractured, and this thing that he used to tuck his pain into and then tuck away in his mind became his Two-Face personality. That's a great beat to play, and I guess if you've always wanted like a slightly different take on Two-Face's origin, this is a good single issue to read. I don't think you have to have read the series up to this point to appreciate it. It just feels like, what are we doing here? Like, do we need a series for this? And honestly, we don't, because it got canceled. It's only, well, not really. It was solicited as a miniseries for 6 issues, but it was plotted out to 10 or 12, and they were hoping it was going to get picked up to 10 or 12. I can see why it's not. Not only because I guess the sales are soft, but it just, I like the concept of the first issue so much, but I don't think it's really proven that there's enough more to tell about Two-Face as a solo character that we need 12 issues to get there. Well, Denny's Camp did it again. I don't know how he does it. He's the most exciting writer in comics right now. This, by the way, is a different cover artist than interior artist, but this cover artist, DK Ruin, is so similar to the style of the interior artist who's Juan Frugeri that it didn't bother me at all. This is another one of these one-shots ultimate stories. Each one of them works all on its own. You don't have to have read anything before or after. And this is just about them killing some Nazis. Let's go kill some Nazis, right? But it's about how Cap and the Human Torch, who are two of the only people that remember the world from before the Maker took over, reminiscing what it was like to be about the invaders, because the invaders still happened in this universe, and what it was like to hunt Nazis at that point. And now they're hunting literal modern-day Nazis. Camp does not beat around the bush. They are Nazis that are following the Red Skull in the modern day, and they're very happy to kill them in the modern day too. It's not just fun because it's fun watching them kill Nazis. It's fun because it tells some really interesting things about this team. It has some really chilling developments about characters that you know and love. It's got really good action. It's got really twisted villain. It's just a really good one-shot comic book that promises the titillation of killing Nazis, follows through on it in a really satisfying way, but then also like twists a bunch of things that we think we know and understand about the Marvel Universe, because it's a different version of the Marvel Universe. This is a 5 out of 5. This is perfect. This is, and the whole idea that Jim Hammond, the Human Torch, only has so much memory because he was developed in the 40s before computers had a lot of memory. And he's like, now I can just get a friggin' USB stick at Best Buy and plug it in and have like 20,000 times the memory I had then. So what does that mean for an artificial man who has to decide what memories he's going to keep and which memories he's not going to keep? And that makes him his own unreliable narrator, but his life is only the thing that he chooses to remember. That's only a tiny, tiny sliver of the plot in this book, but what a tremendously smart book. I mean, Dennis Camp, apparently his Absolute Martian Manhunter, which ships in 2 or 3 weeks on the 26th of March, has pre-orders over 100,000 copies. I think that's partially because the Absolute line is so popular, but I think it's also because people are catching on that Denny's Camp can really do interesting stuff with superheroes. And I'm so interested to see when he brings Miles Morales into the Ultimates universe in that co-writing series with Cody Ziegler later this year. But Ultimates, I think if you're reading one superhero book, it probably should be Ultimates. Just more fantastic. And Federico Blee, who I don't always love as a colorist, he's really, I think it's not just, I think he didn't have the range that I wanted him to have. He didn't have the range. Everything was so blue, and it felt like he did that in everything. You can go blue in the reflections in a scene if it works. Like here, it makes sense that Captain America is highlighted in that low light. It makes sense that blue reflections on a Red Skull mask, on this giant kind of Punisher / US agent character. But it doesn't have to be like that in every scene. And I just really like that we're seeing more variety in his color looks. I want to see him use the full palette. And colors, colors do get better. Like I used to not like Rachel Rosenberg. She's one of my favorite colors now. I think color is just the more, just like me trying to figure out how to make my face look right for the show. The more you do it, the better you get. All right. I didn't read Ultra Mega. It's funny. I remembered I read the first issue of this back in 2021. And I was like, all I remember was that it was viscerally disturbing. So then I went back and looked at my notes, and my notes just said viscerally disturbing. So there you go. It's some kind of kaiju comic, but I remember just really hating it, and everybody else at the time liked it. So maybe, but it wasn't just that I don't like kaiju. There's some real toxicity. There's some real toxic quality to it that I really didn't like, which I don't think is the toxic quality of the author, by the way. I don't think it's James Herron's. I think he's writing a story about that toxic thing, but I just don't always like those stories. All right, now we come to, so I realized that I said I wasn't going to read Uncanny X-Men anymore, but then I had to read it because it was the first issue of this X-Manhunt thing. Here's the thing. The beginning of this comic book that had Professor Xavier was basically his psychic powers are like vibing out of control. And so he gets communications from his daughter, Xandra, in the Shi'ar Empire, who needs him because they're trying to be an armed takeover. And it's just what deathbird between her and being assassinated or captured. That part was great. Let Gail Simone write some X-Men stuff that's not center ring X-Men. She's very imaginative. She writes cool stuff. It's just constraining her to write these characters like Rogue and Wolverine that have a certain way they've got to sound. It's just not working. And it's so funny because this comic, which is drawn by somebody I really like. Who do I really like to do this comic? By Javier Garron, colors by Matthew Wilson, letters by Clayton Cowles. The whole point up until Rogue and Wolverine came on panel, I was like, have I been wrong this whole time? Has this been a good series? Is it great? Is it actually a good book? Then I got to the part with the other X-Men characters. Like, no, it still sucks. The writing for the kid, these outliers kids, the writing for the team, it's just so tremendously bad, worst ever quality that I just let Gail go and play and be Gail. Why don't pretend like she has any interest in writing these characters well that are the core of the X-Men, because she doesn't, and they're not good. Wolverine was just so big, but as soon as we get into like the X-Men fighting against Professor Xavier in the end of this comic, it just stops making sense. The voices are all wrong. The action doesn't track. It's just like it's like almost like two different writers. It was like one writer who knows what they're doing wrote the first half that had the Shi'ar thing, and then one writer who is a total failure and should not be allowed to pick up a pen, by court order, wrote the second half. And you know what? I was so angry after that I did read Usagi Yojimbo, which is I'm not a big Usagi fan, but I know it's like classic of classics. So I signed on. This is very easy to just pick up. It's a brand new series. Usagi and his little traveling crew go to this beautiful, beautiful forest that has beautiful, beautiful plums that when they're pickled, I think, have healing properties, but they're not welcome there because, of course, there's always people there making mischief, stealing plums, cutting down trees, So but before we even get to seeing Usagi Yojimbo, there's two really great scenes. One about a beggar woman who really just wants one plum for her daughter to heal her. And it's interesting in two ways. One, because it first shows her just as a normal fox. And then when she moves into the city to have talking like conversations with the other characters, then we see her become anthropomorphized. So there's kind of this like winking hint from Stan Sakai that like all of this is actually just about normal animals running around not talking to each other, but we're seeing the anthropomorphized version of it for the story. I haven't read enough Usagi to know if that he always does that, but I was like, whoa, that is amazing. Then and also the town doesn't treat her well. So immediately you have this interesting point of like, you're not in the town side because the people are selfish. They won't give up one plum to help this poor beggar woman who just was trying to help her daughter. So that immediately sets the tenor for every encounter that anybody has through the town throughout. So if they burn down a tree in the town, you're kind of rooting for the person burning down the tree because the people aren't generous. When Usagi walks into the town and the people are suspicious of him, you immediately are like, well, they're suspicious because they're assholes, because that's been established. So, this is why he's a master of the form, sets up the story in such a beautifully told, sequential, thought-provoking way that when we finally get to a few pages with Usagi at the end, it doesn't feel like we've been cheated at all, because we know exactly what we're supposed to be feeling about the characters in this moment. He's a master. And dropped in Usagi before and liked it okay, but like this one really grabbed me. So I'm really excited to be reading this comic, which is officially called, by the way, Usagi Yojimbo 10,000 Plums. It's part 1 of 10,000 Plums, but it's Usagi issue 280. Chris Claremont wrote 200, left Uncanny X-Men at 280. That's how much Usagi there is to read to get up to here. So maybe that'll be a project for me in like 2027. Who knows? Okay. This was solicited to be out this week. The first of the Valiant Beyond titles with Valiant Beyond Bloodshot. I looked and looked. It did not actually come out this week, digital or physical. So I guess it got delayed. Great look for the first book in your new line. Good job. We come now to Vampirella, which is on the verge of a relaunch. I don't know if this is the last issue before the relaunch, but we're finally out of this black and white world that's been like inside of Vampirella's brain or somebody's brain, and we're back outside of it. But unfortunately, being back outside of it means we're back to Christopher Priest writing himself as the main character in his Vampirella story, which is so deeply weird. He's writing himself as her psychotherapist, and all he does is talk about how stupid Vampirella is as a story, and that it doesn't make sense, and that he calls her like crazy at CSB, crazy space bitch or something. Like it denigrates the character so much, and I know I'm stupid because I keep reading it, but I love Vampirella because I think she is a cool character and I do like her story. And so it's just so hurtful to see Christopher Priest writing himself as basically like mocking this character, and then we've been getting this run for multiple years, and I've dipped in and out because I keep thinking like, well, if it's still running, surely it's still good. But it feels like it's like Dynamite just like shrugging and saying like, well, we've got a creator that people are interested in. It doesn't matter if he just shits on our character every month because people are interested and we can sell all the titty covers that we want to sell. And nobody's going to like, surely there's people like me out there who just actually love Vampirella and like are like offended by the way he treats the character, but we're relaunching into a #1. And I guess I'm probably stupid enough to pick that up too, because I just want to read some Vampirella comics. Walking Dead Deluxe is just the colorized version of The Walking Dead. Web of Spider-Verse, I think this might be our last one today. So this was like the one shot to kick off all the Spider-Verse story, because Marvel knows it's printing money. Every year they can just do a Spider-Verse crossover comic, and some people will buy it and because they like the Spider-Verse now. This brings in Matt Groom to the Marvel Universe. He's a writer that primarily has been a writer of Power Rangers and also of the Massiverse, so I have no experience with him. He's really, really good. He handled the framing story here so easily. It was such a exposition dump that really could have been like eye-rollingly bad, but he handled it with grace in a way that like kept me engaged in the story and pulled me towards the story instead of just like keeping me away with it. Then there are 3 spiders that basically like the web of destiny is like evaluating if they're going to be its final champion. The first one is Spider Hulk by Greg Pak with really cool art from Alan Robinson, and it's just exploring like the one time Spider-Man got powers of the Hulk if he just kept them. And it's funny, it's lightweight, but it's really drawn well, and it's just like a funny kooky little story. But this second story by this is by Jordan Morris. I don't know who he is. I have to look him up as the writer, but Sumit Kumar draws it, who's the artist from These Savage Shores, which I am obsessed with, colored by Dee Cunniffe. And it's Mary Jane as a vampire slayer, and she hunts down Peter Parker, who's like Spider Dracula. This comic is worth buying just for this. The art was so gorgeous. The Jordan Morris, whoever you are, I'm buying your next comic book. The writing was so good. I'm ready for like a 100-issue series of this. And I'm not usually like an Elseworlds person, but it was, but I want to read 50 issues from before this story because Mary Jane was so interesting. But then I want to read 50 issues from after the story because what happened in the story is so interesting. But unfortunately, the Web of Destiny doesn't choose Spider-Hulk or Count Parker, although maybe it'll come back to them. It chooses the most boring of the 3 stories, which is by Matt Groom. So I guess I take back a little bit of my compliments of him. But it's not a problem with the writing. The problem is that he basically just tells the story in the year 2500 where the Kree are invading the Earth, and he tells it with our Miles Morales. Like, I guess he's supposed to be Miles Morales, but if he was born in 2500 and he also had the Prowler as his uncle in 2500, but he is just Miles Morales, and he's being drawn here by Federico Vincenti, who has drawn Miles's title. So it was like this cognitive dissonance of like, why are we saying this is in the year 2500 when it's just Miles? Now, I agree, it is time to start having some alternate Miles, since usually we have lots of alternate Peters, but it didn't feel alternate. It just felt like the Miles looking like the Miles we know by the artist we know drawing Miles, but supposedly in 2500. And this is the Spider-Man that got drafted for this new Spider-Verse thing. So I guess that's who we're stuck with. Now there's going to be a Venomverse New Blood one-shot where the Venom web of goo, I don't know, is going to pick its new Venom champion. So that's interesting. And I find that, I hope, fingers crossed, that Matt Groom is going to be writing whatever comes out of this, because he was really good. And I really hope Jordan Morris is going to write something else, because he was amazing. And that, there's one more comic book. So look, there's a lot of dumb bullshit in comics that some people enjoy and that some people don't enjoy. I liked some of the 2000s era dumb bullshit of Wolverine. Specifically, I really like Daniel Way Wolverine Origins. I know I'm one of the only people on Earth. And as a part of that, I don't really mind Romulus that much, who is this character that's basically is like the granddaddy of all dog or lupine related mutants. But people despised him the same way that they despised the idea of Azrael as Nightcrawler's father. So you would think that would be something that we would let stay put to bed. But no. Saladin Ahmed brings him back. And Saladin Ahmed not only brings him back, but he makes him key to this plot and makes him the core connection to this gold adamantine. And this issue, basically issue 7 is where we are right now, basically spends the whole issue defining like the origin story of this gold adamantine metal and where it came from and why Romulus is connected to it. And here's the thing. When it comes to Wolverine, I actually do like stupid stories. I don't always want him to be like the deadly efficient killer. I am in for some dumb Wolverine stories. But this might even be too dumb for me. And it's a shame because Martin Coccolo's art is so good. I love the colors from Brian Valencia. But who is this for? Like, who did Saladin Ahmed pitch this Romulus gold adamantine story for? And my Tom Brevoort was like, the fans are going to love that. Because I don't know. I really have to go out on the internet and see how people are reacting to it and find the people that love it. Because even for me, this is like pushing the stupidity of Wolverine a little too far. Also, in terms of you like this or not, it's just a fight scene with Romulus narrating the history of gold and manium. Like, there's nothing really, there's no there. There's nothing to it. It's just a fight scene where he's like, this gold metal is jealous of your silver metal. That literally, that is the story of this comic book. Seeing how badly Saladin Ahmed has failed on Daredevil after so many fans gave him so many chances to get to issue 19, only to figure out that the run is terrible. I just feel like we're watching history repeat here. And I'm like, there's so many people who could write good Wolverine comics. But the thing is, Ahmed, and I say this every week, that this series comes up, has a great voice for Wolverine, but his plotting, he needs like a plot assist or some editor other than Tom Brevoort. And finally, I didn't read Wind, The Power of Blood because I love Wind, and I'm like one whole book behind on Wind, and I'm not going to binge it just for the show. I like reading with Kid Crisis, so I'll catch up when I catch up. But I think this is the last series in the sequence of Wind. I have them all physically. I love this book by James Tynion. And we made it to the end, so now I can check in on the comments. Hooray! Okay, let's see, because I mean, I basically went the whole back half of the alphabet without talking to you. So who knows what you've been up to all this time? You could be having a riot. Okay, let's see. Super Drop has loved everything J.S. Johns ever did with the JSA and love Lemire, but it's a bummer that the JSA series is not hitting. Also, Tiger Eye is telling it's Kid Cudi, and he's old, someone, but so don't trust him. He's old. Oh, I still have my NASA screen half up. There we go. Javier Hernandez just want to say that I look forward to these live streams every week. Thank you for the time. Thank you for watching. You know, like I do it because you all give me good feedback on it. Like if this was just crickets, like I do like seeing myself on screen, but I would probably find some other way to stare at my face and then not do this. So this exists because you give me good feedback on it. You leave comments, you participate in the chat. And if it starts seeming like you're bored with it, I'm going to start asking myself, like, what am I doing wrong here? Because this takes a impressive amount of time to do. And so it really, really helps to know that you care. James Abel saying NYX number 9, you can remove the Professor X part and the story would be the same. This felt like a Krakoa epilogue with all the Krakoa references. Bring on the mojo. I don't know if I agree with that, but okay. Cool Angel, NYX, disappointed that the penultimate issue was a tie-in since I'm not reading the event. Hopefully the final issue is a good send-off. Yeah, it just didn't quite hit the mark. Poison Ivy 31, let's travel back in time for a history lesson of Marshview. Is Ed Cooper supposed to be Ed Gein? Both characters seem to have a few similarity. I don't know what that means, maybe, but I did like the history lesson. Flavio saying, I'm surprised that Poison Ivy sustained that many issues. The book's good, but that's rare nowadays. Yeah, I mean, DC doesn't have a whole lot of titles that have been running that long, and it looks like we're headed into a DC renumber coming later this year because they are going to renumber Batman to number 1, so I'm sure there will be more comics that follow. But yeah, Poison Ivy, it was a little soft in issues 27, 28, 29, but like honestly, it's been really good this whole time. G. Willow Wilson, I mean, don't bet against G. Willow Wilson, I think is the story there. Superjob, haven't read anything Spawn related since the 90s, but for some reason lately I've been thinking about it. I'm back on my Spawn bullshit. I tend to really get into it heavy, and then I'm like, what am I doing with myself? Why am I spending this time and money? I think of the Spawn titles right now, if you have Global Comics, they're all on there, so you don't even have to spend any money. Just sign up for Global Comics monthly every month. But King Spawn, I think, is like a very self-contained title focused on Spawn himself. So it's very fun to read, and it doesn't have all of the background of the McFarlane and people other than McFarlane write it. And then I really like Scorched, which is the team title, and it's had a few good writers on it. So I think right now, if you want to jump in, I would get Global Comics and I would just check out King Spawn and Scorched. There's other titles. There's Gunslinger Spawn, which is very Todd driven, so it's up and down. There's Salmon's Twitch, but I think those two, having now read all of them for 3 or 4 months, I think King Spawn and Scorched are the good ones. Tiger Eyes, do myself a favor and read Simone's Secret Says. Well, when I do the guide, I will, but honestly, I'm hating her on Uncanny X-Men right now. It's hard to have positive feelings about her, Tiger Eyes. Could I just jump into Secret Six? No, you can. I think Nicole Maines does a great job of explaining why the characters are who they are and how they relate to each other. If you wanted to read something before, like, you could read all of Absolute Power, but honestly, Superboy and Dreamer have such a small part of Absolute Power that I almost felt that it was more effectively recapped in Secret Six #1 than it was actually told in Absolute Power by itself. Edwin Billiot read the new X-Men since the late 70s, and for the first time I've given up on the X-books. I think a lot of people are feeling like that. I might be back in the next reboot. What was really interesting, in one of the books this week, maybe it was Uncanny X-Men, somebody replied to that letter that Brevoort replied to a few issues ago, where he was basically like, Krakoa turned the X-Men into something we didn't like, and we want to change that. And this letter basically took him to task and was like, a lot of us did like that. A lot of us do identify with the X-Men for that reason. And it's really hurtful to say that you're trying to take us away from that. And Brevoort had to kind of like backpedal on the letters page, which didn't feel super sincere, but at least he addressed it. Vincent Clark, hey, I haven't gotten a chance to say hello to you yet, I don't think, today. Same with him. Ashamed to see what's happening to X-books. Here's the thing. Clearly somebody's buying them and they're really selling well, but I feel like online, I know I'm exposed to a lot of very X-fan, X-spoiler type people in my online spaces, but usually they have a variety of opinions. They have had a variety of opinions on Krakoa. It wasn't like they all liked Krakoa. I see a smattering of likes and dislikes for certain books. Some people like NYX, some people don't like NYX. Most people like Storm, but not everybody likes Storm. I'm seeing very little positive chatter about Uncanny X-Men. I'm not just trying to pile on to Gail Simone. It gives me no pleasure. I've liked her in the past, but I'm having such animosity towards her because she's ruining my favorite thing, Uncanny X-Men. So, and I'm not seeing a lot of positivity. Sometimes on League of Geeks, I'll read like a positive review, but there's positive reviews about everything. People will put 5 stars on League of Geeks and be like, I hated this issue so much, 5 stars. So you can't trust that. Saz Mirth, my LCS manager said the band's lead singer creates a new persona with each album. Oh, they were talking about Ghost from that Sister Perpetrator comic, and Sister Impurator is the latest persona. Oh, well, that actually, now I'm come back around to be interested. It still was a little bit too much of a misery porn book for me. I just don't subscribe to misery porn, but life is miserable enough. But it was very well made. A little suspension of disbelief problem, but I mean, on technically, art, story structure, it was well constructed. Loved Mark Guggenheim. Edwin, no one was more surprised than me. I thought if there's one thing I could rely on in this ever-changing world is that Mark Guggenheim scripts are absolute dog poop. But that Jedi comic book, here's the thing. Did I just like it because I like Jedis, or was it that good? That's why I need to see other people. It's one of the last things I read because I was reading late. I read until 2 a.m. last night, and I woke up this morning at 6 and kept reading because I was so behind. So I haven't had a chance to see anybody react to it. So I don't know. Did I just like it because it was Jedis, or are people loving it that much? I just don't know. James Abel and Storm #6. I did enjoy the conversation with Storm and Professor X. Yeah, I thought it was really well written. But why didn't you just tell her what was going on? I did love the Storm versus Cyclops fight. Cyclops didn't see that comment. Yeah, it kind of felt like Iodell was told that a certain thing had to happen with Professor X, and so he had Professor X deliberately withhold information from Storm so that the fight could happen. But it was, I just thought the conversation, I agree, the conversation with Professor X was really, really good and like really grounded in who Storm is. Iodell is doing what NYX thinks it's doing, which is like really grounding things in Storm's motivation. I saw somebody on Twitter the other day complaining that Iodell is not doing internal narration for Storm, and so it's keeping us too far from her as a character, which is a thing that I've accused Phoenix of. But the thing is, Phoenix doesn't even feel like the main character in her own comic book right now, in addition to not having her own narration, whereas Storm's comic book is all about Storm. So yeah, you can get away with not using the internal thoughts of that character if we spend every second with the character. I feel like I know what Storm is thinking. It's just not being narrated to me in a box. Lance is back. Happy to hear good things about current stars. Oh, you haven't read it. I thought maybe you would have read it. I might need you to read it. I might have to PayPal you $5 so that you read it, because I so intensely need to know what your opinion is. I've been thinking about it all week. Did I watch any of the Oscar speeches? Of course. I watched all. I love Oscar speeches. the Kieran Culkin speech was funny, and then it continues to pay off this absurd story about how his wife keeps telling him they're going to have more kids if he wins more awards. It's so weird. It's so strange. But it's, yeah. And then, you know, I mean, I like Zoe Saldana. I don't know if Emilia Perez is good or not. I didn't watch any of the Oscar movies, but I mean, it was fun to see Zoe Saldana win and be passionate about winning. That was probably my favorite speech. I also like the cartoon guy speech, the Flo that one. He was like, this is an independent cartoon. Like, we did it ourselves. Like, he had a, or maybe I'm even confusing that with the guy the director, Sean Baker, who won for Nora, who talked a lot about being independent. But I love seeing like real success stories. Although Nora supposedly only had a budget as low as it did because they were like really screwing over their union workers, and then there had to be like a union dispute against it. I don't know. I'm not up on all the movie gossip. All right. James Abel apparently still is reading Thundercats. It was a Snarfish idea. Let's start Rhino. With 90% of the issue had no dialogue. It should have been a backup story. 2 to 4 pages, the most brutal, James. Ultimates 10. So much happened within a few pages with Red Skull and Namor now being allowed to be one with the sea. What a great cliffhanger. It was brilliant. Yeah, I mean, I felt some things. I felt things. Lance saying Batman the Animated Series 2-parter is my favorite Two-Face origin. Jean-Remy Argueta, wow, Tin Can Society sounds awesome. No one was more surprised than me. First of all, it's not actually written by Remender, so it doesn't have that like oppressive Remender cynicism, but the craft is so amazing. The other thing I really liked, which I'm not going to bring it back up because I already closed all my PDF stuff, is it's the writer happens to be white, and the main character who gets killed that all these people are friends with was black. And so he opens, there's a content warning on the beginning of each issue that's like, hey, this comic has violence against people of color and people with disabilities, and some of it is graphic. So, you know, but like that happens to be the story we're telling, but we're not here to glorify it. I'm paraphrasing, but like I appreciated reading that, because then the first page was this disabled black man who had been brutally murdered, but also he wasn't just killed to make these other characters feel something. He's a very important character in his own comic book. He just happens to be dead. And then in the afterward, in that same issue, they talked about like, hey, you know, I might not be the right writer to write this, but it was a story I really wanted to tell about power and disability. And so I'm telling it. But like the writer basically said, like, I appreciate it if this is not for you. Which again, like, I respect a lot. I think just being willing to have that conversation is all that I'm looking for. I'm not an own voices person. I don't think that like, hey, I have a, you know, like gay character who stubbed their toe. I better find a gay writer who stubbed their toe. I don't believe in that. I think authors are artists, and artists should not just have to work from their own perspective all the time. But I like having a little window into the perspective of the artist about why they chose to write about somebody who is so unlike them. That to me is fundamentally interesting. Ruben Rise, hello, sir. Weird question. Why do I push my books all the way in? Sometimes because I put stuff above them, but I'll tell you why. Because the sun in New Zealand is so strong that things get super, super sun bleached here. And I do have blackout curtains that I hang that I usually close when I'm not on the show. But when things are pushed in further on the shelf, especially in this shelf, the sun doesn't hit them directly. And that's always been my habit living in New Zealand. So, hey, fun crisis lore. I didn't even realize I was doing it for a reason, but I absolutely am doing it for a reason. James Abel, Uncanny Alexman. Not sure if I understand what exactly happened with Professor X during this issue. Not a good way to begin. Yeah, it did seem like a terrible beginning to a major crossover because it made no sense. I just like Shi'ar stuff. Super Job. That is the biggest Wolverine. Yeah, he had big man titties in that issue. He was large. He was like wider than he is tall. Mall 360, glad I fell off of the Uncanny train. What a mess of a book. I agree. Edwin Billiot. We could use a few court orders to get some people from writing or drawing comics, but you know what? People get better. People change. Jason Aaron, I used to hate him writing everything. He's got 3 books in my top 10 right now. I have a Remender story in my top 10 right now. People grow and change. And that's why I go back and check on these comics. Even when I have a creator I think that I hate so much, and there are many that I do, I still will check in on them from time to time because people change as artists. People change as writers. People change and evolve. And so like, there's very few creators, even creators who've done terrible things or support terrible causes, who I won't just like check in on later to see how they're doing. Rubber Reese, I don't know. I understand that the choice to have Xavier is hallucinating in the second half of the book. I understand how they introduced it, but I don't know that it was necessary given his motivation. Yeah, it seemed that's the thing about the Gail Simone writing on the Uncanny X-Men. It feels like it always is like layering plot beats that we don't need onto characters that had good motivation already. And I keep going back to that issue where Jubilee is coaching the deaf kid in the Outliers, and she doesn't mention being a vampire, and she doesn't mention that she has a kid on her own, and she's like trying to entertain him with her power. I'm like, you're layering in beats that we don't need because the character motivation is already there. Like, why are you trying to build up stuff? So yeah, Xavier, it would have made perfect sense for Xavier to be fighting with Rogue's team without hallucinating that they were the original X-Men and then fighting them, which still made no sense. Jean-Remy Argueta, agree, new Vampy fan, but the character's so awesome and now I'm scared. Yeah, there are so many amazing. She is a character that absolutely is about TNA. I mean, clearly, but that doesn't mean you can't write good stories with her. The Paul Cornell series of her is amazing, but you have to have read something else about her before you read that. Not even sequentially. You don't have to have read the story right before that. Just any Vampirella to like really get it. Also, I love the what is it called? Vengeance of Vampirella, which was a continuation of the 90s series. It was so good. But that makes me really want to get the 90s series, and it's never been reprinted. I had it in my cart from eBay. It was only like $110 for 25 issues, including like and a zero and like a Wizard half issue. So they were only like $4 per issue, but then the shipping to New Zealand was like $70. And I was like, oh, I want this run so bad. It's a perfect, and I finally could read it because I want to read the 90s. I didn't have it in the 90s and it's never been collected all the way. So I'm like, oh, this is my chance. But I just couldn't bring myself to spend $180 on 25 That's like, no omnibus is that expensive. So if you've got the Vampirella Masters, which I do right here, they cover a lot of 90s and early 2000s Vampirella, but they don't cover that main Vampirella series, and they don't collect sequentially. They collect one or two creators at a time, but altogether they actually do cover a pretty big period of Vampirella. This is why I need to do a Vampirella guide though, because it's really hard to figure out what order Vampirella goes in, and like, especially because it's been collected so strangely like that. So it's one of the next guides I'll complete, but honestly, it's taken so long to get up to speed for the show for the past couple of months that I haven't been doing as many guides as I usually do. But this is the first week I had no catch-up reading. The only catch-up I did was Tin Can Society. Everything else I was caught up on. So there's only a few books that I know I still have to do catching up on. I still have to catch up on a little bit of Savage Sword of Conan. There was another book this week that I thought maybe I would catch up on, but I didn't. But I can't think of what that would have been based on what we talked about. But yeah, the catching up has just been taking like hours and hours of extra time. That would be my guide time. But I've kind of decided like I'm investing in this show and investing in talking to you. So even though I want new guides constantly, I'm going to give that up for a couple of months. Not entirely. I'm still working in the background. I still did do a Red Hulk guide and a Magic guide. And I'm still keeping all of my existing 250 guides updated. But I'm going to like take a step back from that for a couple of months to catch up on reading and do the show. Logan Wayne, once again, it sounds like Christopher Peace is still writing a character he deeply, deeply hates. I've never read Vampirella, but that sounds like a real shame and a middle finger to her. But the thing is, the positive thing I can say about it, because I'm always trying to find the positive, is he part of what he's doing is acknowledging how campy Vampirella is as a character and how absurd she is as a character, which I do think is a component of writing a good Vampirella book, but it feels so down-punching and so misogynistic towards her all the time that it's hard, even when it's an issue without his insert character, that it's just, I don't understand. Like, it really feels like he hates her. I don't understand. But I wouldn't be confused if somebody likes it. Like if somebody was like, oh, I love it because it's so self-aware and it's so fourth wall breaking about how ridiculous Vampirella is, I would completely appreciate that that's why they like it. That would make sense to me. Flavio Greg Pak, it's been a while since I've heard from him. He's been away from Marvel a little bit. He's been doing a lot of solo stuff. He has a great social media presence on Blue Sky. He has one that he talks about comics and stuff solely, and then he's really a big social justice person. Also, he does a lot of manual photography. So then you can follow just his comic account, or you can follow his like everything account. And he's one of the people that speaks the most rationally about social justice right now. He doesn't just get hung up on getting angry about something. If there's something he wants to change, he will go down the rabbit hole and like find the phone number, find the mailing address, figure out how to like protest. He will always come through with like the actual action that you need to do. So it is exhausting to follow, and I stopped following him that version of his account on my comics account because I just want to follow comic stuff. But on my personal presence, I follow it because when I'm ready to tune in and feel like I want to do something, like write a letter, call a senator back, I still vote in Pennsylvania, so I still call senators there. He is one of my favorite people to follow for that. And also he's got cool indie stuff too. He had that comic about the city where everything is sinful. I forget what it's called, but I've talked about it in past shows, and it's pretty good. I mean, Greg Pak is always reliable. He just hasn't been at Marvel that much lately. Jean-Remy Argueta, is the relaunch still going to be Priest on it? I think so. I think it is. Yeah, unfortunately for us, but James Abel, Wolverine number 7. By the way, if you had AMAs, this ran like 10 minutes shorter than the past couple weeks, so I will do a lightning round of AMAs if you have any more. Love the question about the shelves and some other things. Wolverine number 7, this issue feels like a young kid playing with his action figures. James, this is why we are a couple, because I often think that like certain comic books to me are fun because they're toyetic. I mean, and one of my favorite words, I mean, having to do with or suggesting a toy. And sometimes I just want to see people mash their toys together, you know, and that can be fun. And I think when used in limited quantities, it's really, really fun. But if you get a whole story that's about mashing toys together, that's when you get that rubber banding of plot where like they double crossed, but then they got double crossed, but then they died, but then he came back from the dead. Because think about how you used to play with toys, at least for me. I used to, oh, this is some great Crisis deep lore. Okay, this is for everybody who stuck around through the whole issue or episode. I had so many G.I. Joes. I was addicted to G.I. Joes. I probably had over 100 individual G.I. Joes, which is funny because I was pretty poor at points as a kid. But they were only $3 each. So it was easy. Like every time you had $3 that you scrounged up, you know, literal changing sofas, added up to $3 pretty quickly. Anyway, so I had all these G.I. Joes. And right when I got into comic books, I was like right at that age that maybe I was getting a little old to be playing with G.I. Joes, but I didn't care because I could basically make my own comic books with G.I. Joes. So I broke all my G.I. Joes and Cobra into teams and I gave them names from comics. Like one of them was X-Factor, but they weren't like X-Men X-Factor. They were just my doing X-Factor. And I told stories with them and I had a huge binder and I would outline the plot for every play that I had with the G.I. Joes. I would write it like it was a little comic book recap, like in Wizard magazine. And I would like keep track of the issue numbers. And then sometimes it would cross over or people would die or there would be like a special event. And I did that for years. And unfortunately, I don't have the binder anymore, but I used to have a binder with me. This was pre-computers. So me writing in longhand all the plots of all of my G.I. Joe comics. And I would sometimes get a disposable camera and take pictures of them like fighting on the floor and to be like the covers of my comics. And my mom would be like, are you developing pictures of G.I. Joes on the floor? Because again, before digital cameras, I'm like, yes, it's my comic book covers. And I just remember, you know, it's, if you're just making up stories as you go as a kid, yeah, they fall off the cliff, they come back, they fight the back, they're on the back foot, now they win, that it goes back and forth. It's got that rubber bandy quality. That when the toys mash together so many times that it starts to be that's when I'm like, okay, I could just go get some G.I. Joes and play with them and it could be better than this. I'm always at risk at being one of the adults who goes back and spends thousands of dollars amassing every single G.I. Joe, which is why it's so dangerous. I'm not going to get it down now because we're almost on the show and everything will collapse. But I have that G.I. Joe omnibus that has the pictures of every G.I. Joe toy ever in it, which if you love G.I. Joe, please go and buy it. It's the most beautiful book I own. I'll show it next time. But I'm always in danger of like somehow being like, I'm going to spend $5,000 on G.I. Joes, which I can't and I shouldn't. And I have no time in my day to even set them all up and dust them, let alone play with them. I had to give up my Marvel Legends because I didn't have time to dust them or the money to pay for them. But I love G.I. Joes. So there's some deep, deep, deep Crisis lore. Tiger Eyes Priest is an amazing writer that always gets saddled with characters he doesn't care for. Yeah, and you know, like I also appreciate from the perspective of somebody gives Priest that chance. If they're like, I'm going to pay you to write 50 issues of Vampirella and you can do whatever you want with this character, what is he going to say? No. Priest has been wronged many times from this comic book industry. Well, and he at points was one of the best writers in comic books and he should have been on the biggest books in comic books. It kind of pains me that we never saw Priest writing X-Men back 20 years ago when maybe he could have come and brought some true love to those characters. Although he did get to write them a little bit by way of writing Black Panther, I suppose. No, I guess X-Men weren't really intersecting with Black Panther when he wrote Black Panther. But I think you take my point. Okay. Logan Wayne. Man, I absolutely hated Daniel Way's Wolverine and Romulus. No offense to me. No offense taken. The only Wolverine that might have been worse is Jeff Loeb. There we can agree. But I think because I was just coming back to comics at that point that I didn't have a sense of what had been happening with Wolverine. So the idea that Wolverine Origins was like was revealing everything that had ever happened to Wolverine, to me that was exciting. Like imagine coming back to comics and the one biggest mystery that existed the entire time that you were a comic book reader, the first thing you pick up is like, we're now definitively answering that mystery in a 50-issue series. I was like, so I think it just was the right comic at the right time for me. Lance McNair, I can't stand when writers try. Okay, a lot of you have opinions on Vampirella, apparently. Maybe we should have a Vampirella book club. Maybe we should like read some good Vampirella. What about Rat City? Any good? Rat City is Spawn 2099. It's totally standalone. It's in a different universe. It gets kicked off by something that happens in the main Spawn universe, but then it doesn't attach to the main Spawn universe at all. And it's a standalone Spawn in 2099 comic. So if you like Spider-Man 2099 or Batman Beyond, that is what Rat City is. I really like the art. I think Erica Schultz writes it really well. It's just, I'm just trying to catch up on them. That's one of the books I have to catch up on. I've only read the first 2 issues, but I thought they were great. So if you like that kind of thing, you would like those. James, the medium answer, I don't understand Brevort's problem with Krakoa. Yeah, I can tell you it. Editorial at a high level, possibly Kevin Feige level, basically, I'm sure, I've into it that they were like, you got to walk back a little bit of this X-Men as terrorist thing, especially because I think since people kept saying the X-Men had an ethno state on Krakoa, that I think there was a real nervousness at Marvel that there was going to be parallels drawn in the media between the X-Men and Israel with the X-Men movie incoming. And I think Marvel was told to get real far away from that real fast. That is I don't have any insider information ever. I'm not friends with anybody who would ever tell me these things. That is just my intuition. Krakoa, Lance says, felt like a natural progression for the characters to me. It's like one reason that Rise of Starwalker sucks so much is backpedaling. Yes, well, we're discovering Lance might be the third of the Madrox duplicates of me and Zach Rabaroff. Me and Zach Rabaroff and I always like have the same thoughts at the same time. It's truly uncanny. And Lance and either we have a psychic connection or we're Madrox dupes, very, very different Madrox dupes of each other. Super Chop saying to me, Guggenheim always came across as Alan Heinberg at home. Perfectly said. Alan Heinberg, for those of you who don't know, was another TV writer. I think he wrote and created The OC, I want to say. Could be wrong. And he came and wrote Young Avengers, which was legitimately great. Then Guggenheim, who had been steering a lot of the Arrowverse CW shows, as well as some other things on TV, came along and he's like the Alan Heinberg, AliExpress Alan Heinberg. Logan Wayne, what a thoughtful disclaimer. Yeah, I mean, it might not work for you. Look, I'm not Black or disabled. So you might read the disclaimer and then see the comic and be like, this is taking advantage of a character in a way that really upsets me. I can't speak on that. I just liked that there was thought put into it. Oh my gosh, you know what? I got nowhere to be. We started 30 minutes earlier than usual today. We're only getting to the 3-hour mark. I'll keep talking. No one can stop me. Well, now you sold me on it even more. I value self-awareness a lot. That's the thing. I like that it was self-aware. You might still have a problem with it. It still might trigger you, but self-awareness of a creator, of an artist counts so much for me. Going back to Ultimates for a moment. Yeah, because I loved it. This is Robert Rees, by the way, if you're just listening. I love from a meta standpoint that, of course, in the universe being manipulated by an evil Reed Richards, Namor ended up mounted on the wall. I totally missed that. That's so good. I totally missed that. Totally missed it. John Rami Agueta. I was planning on getting these Master Series, or is that the best of the best of the Master Series TBB doesn't have everything in the individual trades. The individual trades always come back and get resolicited because you can even get them on DCBS, but they're clearly just the same stock. I don't think they've been back to print on them. The one that they didn't have for a while was the one with Warren Ellis, which is number 2 because Warren Ellis did some things and people didn't like him so much, but now they're selling that one again. So for a while you could only get Warren Ellis as back stock. I think I got 2 or 3 of them on DCBS because they got resolicited, because Dynamite's great about that. They resolicit their old trades all the time, so they will come up in previews. And then I think I had an IST order waiting and I got them. But again, they're not in an explicit order. Each one of those books stands alone, so you don't need all 8 of them. But the Masters Omnibus is like a greatest hits of them. It does not have every issue that all of them have, because that's about 400 pages. And I think there's like 600 pages all told. So it doesn't have everything. Sounds like we have a lot of Vampirella fans on the stream that would like to read more Vampirella if they knew what to read. So maybe I need to prioritize finishing that guide after we get through My Magneto tomorrow. Bunk is back at the 3-hour mark, as he always is. Hello, Bunk. And I have the stamina to keep streaming. You know what? I think part of why I'm really into it today is I was not feeling well last night. I was like, I do not need to be sick for the stream. Plus, this week has so much going on. We have a My Magneto tomorrow. I have Omnidog jamming on comics with Freddie this week. I have a ton of work I need to do this week. I was hoping that I could get ahead on CK Post. So it's just going to be like a crazy week. I'm like, of course I'm getting sick. So I actually don't feel sick, although I could be making it worse by doing all this talking. So I think I'm just having some euphoria. Plus, as I was reading the comics this week, I was really hating a lot of the comics. It actually was a really low rated week for me. At one point, I think my average rating in the week was like 2.17. And usually my average rating is around like 2.8 or 2.9 because I read bad and good. I read everything. So my average rating is never going to be like a 4. I'm working on a graphic that I'm going to start showing at the beginning of the show in the next couple weeks that shows my rating and how it changes and the average rating. I just haven't nailed a way for it to look good on screen yet, but I really want to bring you into that to see how my opinion fluctuates. Is Mutant Massacre Omni worth the buy? Yes. I'm waiting. Oh, well, that's not a comment on the difference between the 2 lines of omnibuses. You don't need the Mutant Massacre tie-ins. You don't need them. You don't need them all. But they do tell part of the story, and they tell the angel getting crucified part. Pardon me, I'm having some hiccups. But I don't know why I lied. I'm burping. It's not hiccups. But that's also in the X Factor omnibus. So you have to really decide, are you going to buy the event omnibuses or not? Because if you want to buy the event books, you'll get Mutant Massacre, and then Mutant Massacre Prelude, Mutant Massacre, Fall of the Mutants, Inferno Prelude, Inferno, and you'll have a huge chunk of the whole X line, and then you can get Claremont and Lee 1 and 2 to get all the way up to there. But if you just want Uncanny X-Men, that's why you would continue after Uncanny X-Men Volume 4 to get Volume 5 and 6 and the line that way. Omar and I did a great stream about it. Feel free to ask me more questions if you want to comment on this video with like a more specific question that I can answer in more detail with like a guide in front of me. But I think the time to mix and match the Claremont books and the event books, the only reason to do that is if you're going to buy the Claremont omnibuses right up to Mutant Massacre or Mutant Massacre Prelude, and then switch over to all the event books up to the Claremont Lee books, and never care later that they put out more Claremont only books, which I did and was my strategy, because that was the strategy for the longest time. That's the right thing to do. Otherwise, I would just say stick to one line or the other. Oh, Kenneth Crowley, I was wondering where you were, because I was talking about Superman stuff and Nicole Maines. Did you like Dreamer on CW? Was she cool? Sorry, tune in late. Right now, DC is doing great. Marvel's 50-50. Yeah. I mean, oh, it's so cool. You'll really dig it because that's all like really classic DC art. But yeah, DC right now, I love. I mean, even on a rough week like this week that had a couple of DC books that I just don't like Batgirl and JSA, the quality of DC's line is just outstanding. Kane, wow, everybody's rolling in late this evening. Maybe the time change threw everybody off. I realize I'm super late. I have a good reason. I made homemade chicken soup with homemade chicken stock. Started at 11 a.m., finished an hour ago. Yesterday, I made, what are they? Baharat, which is a specific kind of spice mix that's like a Middle Eastern spice. It's got like cinnamon and black pepper and paprika. But I made a Baharat mix, and then I like really sweated some onions and like made this like really yummy like onions and Baharat and tomato paste. Because we say tomato here in New Zealand, tomato. And then I made chicken meatballs with that, which is basically like a little bit of rice. It's like 1/3 roughly. I can give you the recipe if you want, but it's 1/3 rice and 1/3 Baharat and like 1/3 ground chicken meat. And they are so good, but it takes a long time. You've got to make the rice. You got to sweat the onions. You have to weigh all the spices out. Then you have to mix the spices with the onions. It's just a lot of steps. So I think I wound up between cooking and cleaning up last night, I think it was like 3.5 hours, which is why I'm so behind on comics. And I even said, should I make these tonight? But they're one of my favorite recipes. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just doing it. So you know what? Good food made well is always worth spending the time on. And your dad loved it, which is all that mattered. Wow. Jean-Remy Argueta, I'm hyped for my Vampy guide. Okay, I'm going to prioritize it. Part of me is like, is anybody going to care? I have these certain indie characters where I'm like, I know I want to do the guide. Like my Lady Death guide. It's going to happen eventually. I'm just going to get bored one weekend that I don't have 50 comics to read. And I'm just going to do it because I love Lady Death. But then I'm going to go and buy them on eBay, which is going to be the bad part. But Vampirella, I'm like, nobody ever talks about her. And I'll get personal for a second. I'll read any comic, right? And I like bad girl heroines. And I've mentioned in the past that I would get things that looked cheesecakey in the 90s. I'm telling you, the cheesecake angle was the farthest thing from my mind. But I would get them because they would have female characters in them that were cool, right? But I think at some point I've encountered some people online. They're like, well, you read all these things and you like Greg Land and you like Vampirella because you just want to see like women naked on panel and that's what you like. And that's like so upsetting to me. Because like, and like what you like, right? If that's what you like, I don't care if that's what you like. But that's specifically not why I'm coming to these comics. And I hope that all of my ironic comments about titty comics all throughout the streams have let you know where I really stand on sex in comics and women being objectified in comics. And that I want to see everybody. If we're going to objectify people in comics, let's objectify anybody. But anyway, long story short, I've been made to feel like I'm like weird for liking Vampirella and thinking her character is cool because like you're only supposed to like her if you're into the TNA of her, which I'm like, that's just who she is. It's just part of her lineage. It's what she was as a horror magazine. And you can like her for that, but that's not the only reason that exists to like her. So I think part of me is like kind of shy to be like, ooh, do people want to read a Vampirella God? Because I think a lot of people actually are very interested in Vampirella as a character. And because so many people just want to look at the TNA quality of her variant covers, they're almost like shy to be like, okay, but what are the good stories? So I'm so excited that the archives made you fall in love with her. Me too. I mean, that's why I bought all of them. I haven't read all of them yet, but every time I open them and read them, I love them. But I love horror. I love campy horror. I love the flip of taking a woman who she was never sired by Dracula. That's just who she is. She's from the planet Dracul, and she's a vampire that's technically one of the progenitors of our vampires. So I love the whole flip of that to make her empowered, which is why I really like her character, which is why Christopher Priest annoys me. Anyway, but I love that you have a soft spot for her, and I promise I will actually work on the guide. Peter used to play G.I. Joes and make stories about them. What a nerd. Winking emojis to indicate this is not a serious statement. But not only played and made stories, but had binders where I wrote down the issue number and then summarized, and I would do it in the style of the classic Wizard Price Guide. So if it was like, if I got a new G.I. Joe, it'd be like first appearance of like that G.I. Joe. Or if like one of them died or something, because you remember Old Wizard, it would have like first Rogue, like art, or like O for Origin, like Origin, Storm. I would do that. And yeah, so I've always been this nerd. The Art of G.I. Joe, Real American Hero Omnibus. If I try to get it down from there, this whole room is going to collapse. I promise I'll show it on a future stream. We're talking about Kane's amazing chicken soup recipe. James, the Medium Answer, is reading Rat City and loves it. Planet 628, I don't think I've said hi to you yet this stream. I've never heard me bring up the G.I. Joe comic in any stream. Well, I've been reading all of them. I've been reading Real American Hero and the main G.I. Joe comic. But so you will hear me continue to talk about G.I. Joe. I've been really loving Real American Hero by Larry Hama. It's been great. But I didn't really read the G.I. Joe comics at the time because I just had all the toys. Like, I was like, why do I need to read somebody else making up a story about G.I. Joes? I've got my story right here. And if I had all the toys, I would still be doing that, and you would never see me. James the Medium Answer, that makes sense. Krisis, also one of my favorite Dark Horse books. Well, I really love Living Hell by Caitlin Yarsky. I don't know. You know I'm bad at this off the top of the head stuff. Let me look around and see if I like Grendel. I haven't read all of Grendel historically, but this, which was my first time ever reading Grendel, Devil's Odyssey, was just a series of one-shot adventures of Grendel in space. I really, really loved it. And then I was like, oh, I guess I'm going to read lots of Grendel. I don't have a lot of Dark Horse in this room because this is a room where I keep my epics and then a lot of my Image. So I can't answer that question a lot better, but I know I have individual series that I really love from Dark Horse. And if I had my spreadsheet in front of me, I could tell you. But anyway, that's a good Grendel comic, standalone. Great. Okay. For me, when writers and some filmmakers get Superman wrong, they strip out the heart and hope and humanity of the character and make him grounded. It works for some characters like Batman, but not for Superman. Yes, he should be challenged, but the core of the character must remain intact. I would very much agree with that. Lance McJair, God's glad that he got to tune in. Yeah, I know. This has been going on forever. Now people are leaving. Okay. Really looking forward to my Magneto. Am I going to be there for Evergreen Wolverine stories? Of course I am. I mean, technically, I'm the co-host of Evergreen. Like, I don't need to make a big deal of it that I'm like a co-host on your Magneto, but I am, and it's an accurate description. But yeah, I because Omar really wants to do Evergreen manga. I'm like, well, I won't have anything to say, and he's like, well, we can't do one without you. And I'm like, well, you could, and he's like, no, you're the co-host. But I think I could be more of like a game show host on manga and just like steer the ship a little bit. So I think we'll eventually do some that are things that I'm not necessarily a fan of. But yes, I will absolutely be on the Evergreen so much. Okay. Okay. I think, gosh, well, we could just keep. How have we not talked about Lady Gaga yet? I was going to start the stream with like, comics are canceled. This is Krisis here, and I'm here to talk all about Lady Gaga's mayhem. We're going to rank every track and talk about the deep meanings behind all the 14 songs of Lady Gaga. I mean, I listened to it all weekend. Probably another reason I was so behind on comics for this week. I was going to cover a Lady Gaga song, but I just didn't have enough time to practice it. Yeah, I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. It's got an old Gaga feel, but also she's always been a rocker, and she just wanted to break into pop music. So she wasn't in a rock idiom, but she's always been a rocker. You can hear it even on her first album with Brown Eyes. You can hear it with the Beatles references on Speechless. You can hear it with all the electric guitars and so many songs on Born This Way. And I think that this is like it's a rock album. It kind of tells you it's going to be a synth album, but then it's rock. And a lot of it sounds, I mean, there's the clear David Bowie reference on Killa, which he did on Saturday Night Live, but there's clear Nine Inch Nails references, not just in that, but in other songs as well. Hear a little bit of like Placebo in there as well, but just like some really good rock tracks. But it's still Gaga, it's still poppy, it's still the one song Fade Into You, Vanish Into You. It directly quotes Bad Romance in an intentional way, which, I mean, maybe I should do video essays on Lady Gaga. Would any of you watch that? I have a plethora of interests, not just comic books. Which brings me, okay, I'm going to say like two more things, then we're going to play a song if you care to hear the song. It's not going to be Lady Gaga. So I was thinking that there are other videos that I want to do, but I don't know if I have the wherewithal to do a recorded video and do all the editing. I think that might kill me, so it might be a live stream. Something I do kind of want to do this week is the new DCBS catalog came out, and I know that Omar and Jess do going through the catalog, but I just thought it would be fun for me to go through the catalog one time, partially because I would give opinions on all the series, many of which I'm reading, right, from all these publishers, but also then I would get to talk about collections, which I don't get to talk about on the show. So I was thinking, but that would only be like once a month. And so it's not as easy to plan for and like have you all show up every week. But this week's going to be so busy, but it did just come out this week. And I was wondering, is there a better way to show all the things for an upcoming month? If I could just go through the previews catalog, I would, but now it's like split between previews and lunar. So I guess I'm just asking, and I'm not going to look at a lot more comments before I get off the stream, but I will see them after. Like, should I do that? Should I try to find time for an hour or two? Would you value that, hearing my opinion of going through all of the DC Best catalog? Because I would do it. And the other thing is I do have hauls, but my hauls are almost all Epic collections. Like, and then every so often there'll be like one or two other things, like a Spawn compendium or something. So I'm like, I would do haul. I don't want to do an edited haul video because it's just me talking about Epic collections, which Curtis does so much better than me. But I do want to like share them with you. And I have a box right off camera with the X-Acto knife on top of it that I could open, but you know, we ran out of time. So like, should I maybe do like a monthly collected edition stream? But then also I'm thinking I do want to do a Patreon exclusive thing because so many of you have been so generous in joining the Patreon and supporting me there that I kind of want to do at least one video a month that's like a Patreon thing. So I don't know. I'm very open to your feedback. You haven't led me wrong yet, and you've given me really good feedback when I get doubtful about if this is as good as it should be. So I really, really trust your perspective on this. And so if you give me some of your perspectives, I'm happy to hear them. So that was one of the things I wanted to talk about. What was the other thing I wanted to talk about before I got to my song? Do I remember? And do I even know what song I'm playing? Oh, I do. Okay. So that was one thing. And then, and Lady Gaga. And I think that's it. So you just keep saying more and more great things in the chat, but you know, it's already 3 hours and 15 minutes. So I think we got to wrap it up. I'm going to play a song. So and I know not all of you stay for the songs, which is fine. So if you're not going to stay for the songs before you go, I am on Map My Ex Magneto tomorrow on the Near Mint Condition channel with Riley and Odfell and Omar. It's going to be a lot of fun. If you want to play your own home version of the game, we're all working from my Magneto guide. So you can go in Crushing Krisis and look at the guide. It was actually one of the original 4 guides I did for Patreon back at the end of 2016. Then on Tuesday evening, pretty early in the evening, I think 6 p.m., maybe 7, I am on OmniDog's Vault with OmniDog and Freddy. And that's just our monthly hangout. There's like a loose topic. I'm sure we'll talk about Lady Gaga. I'm sure we'll talk about Chapel Roan, and we'll talk about comics, and we'll just hang out and have fun. And that is it for my streaming schedule of the week. Although I might be back talking about the pre-orders. Who knows if you're all giving me positive feedback on that. I also do new releases on crushingkrisis.com. Don't forget about that. Also, all the guides are on crushingkrisis.com with all this accumulated knowledge I talk about on the stream. That's all in the guides. And it's really helpful if you sign up for Patreon at the $1 or $2 level. And there are going to be video rewards as soon as you and me decide what they should be, because I feel like you're the people who would consume them. So I want to do something you want to hear me do. Like, what do you want to hear me scream about stuff? Do you want to hear me read old comics? What is like the most cool thing you want to hear me do? Because if it's something niche that like hundreds of people aren't going to watch on YouTube, then it's the perfect thing for me to do for Patreon. So I think that's all my disclaimers. Go with God or grace or whatever you choose to go with. And now I'm going to talk about the song a little bit. So the song is called, gosh, I don't believe I'm going to do this on camera. It's called Cuts Both Ways. And it's not a song I ever played with my band. It's a song that I wrote in New Zealand. So almost all of the songs that I've been playing here have been band songs. And it makes me really nervous to play non-band songs because I never had the chance to like work through them and hear them back. Like band songs, I just practiced them hundreds of times. And I had a drummer, an amazing drummer named Zena Perillo, who's still active in the Philly area and plays with a great cover band. I'll have to find a name for cover band for the next stream so you can know. So I'm very, very sensitive about playing these songs that basically haven't been road tested, which is funny because, sorry, I'm just moving everything, which is funny because this is like my opportunity to road test them and get some feedback from you and like hear them back. So I shouldn't be afraid, but I am for reasons that I can't fully explain or describe. And so I don't have any really good videos of me playing this. And the funny thing about this is it sounds like a breakup song, which it very much is. And I wrote it when I got this job that I had in the year 2000, the original flavor COVID year, although we didn't really have COVID in New Zealand that year, although we did lockdowns. And this song totally predicted the shit show that job turned into, almost like word for word, beat for beat. Or did I write at the end of that job? Now this is why I have a database. No, you know what? I wrote it at the end. There was another song I wrote that predicted it word for word, beat to beat. So it sounds like a breakup song, but it's actually a song about being gaslit by, in this case, an employer. But it's very personal to me. And I think it was right around the time that I was about to like just actually say that I was non-binary in like public settings, which I didn't for sometime after that. And I felt like I was on the verge of feeling comfortable enough to do that at that job. And then I didn't, and I couldn't, and I wound up leaving the job. And I couldn't even like put that fully into words to say like how disappointing that was. So that's very heavily encoded into the song. And it's called Cuts Both Ways. And I'm going to mess up the intro probably 5 times because I always do. I just have to, there we go. Okay. That's because I'm supposed to play in 10th position. Okay. Nope. This is why I get nervous. I'll just skip the intro if I can't get it right. I'll try it one more time. I got a little too comfortable and showed the real face of me. Let my hair down, put my heels on, because you said you loved me. You did your best to do your worst, and did the thing you knew would hurt the most. No one had cut me like that before, had no idea what I was in for. From you and your double-edged sword, cutting us both down so you can stand up straight, bleeding all over the floor. And then you say I was the perpetrator. I should have known from the start that a smile that sharp you would cut both ways. Cut both ways. Called me into your little room. You spoke to me like you know better how to be me than I do, or I ever would. Every sin you commit, you said were my sins too. If I pointed a finger, you turned into a mirror and told me that I was the one who broke all the rules. You and your double-edged sword, cutting us both down so you can get your way. Bleeding all over the floor, and then you say I was the perpetrator. I should have known from it. Cut both ways. Cut both ways. That's the way, you control. You say each cut hurts you more than it hurts me, when no one ever needed to get hurt at all. If I stayed with you, I'd be in tatters, but leaving you's gonna leave me shattered. The only thing that matters is you can't hurt me anymore. You and your double-edged sword, cutting us both down so you can stand up straight, bleeding all over the floor. And then you say I was the perpetrator. I should have known from the start, with a smile that's sharp, that you and your double-edged sword, cutting us both down so you can get your way, bleeding all over the floor. And then you say I was the perpetrator. I should have known from the start, with a smile that's sharp, that you would cut both ways. Cut both ways. Cut both ways. Cut both ways. Wow, so that is the first time I think I've played Cuts Both Ways for anyone. outside of this house or just one friend on Zoom. I've been Krisis with a K. You've been truly, truly wonderful and has made my day. Treat yourselves kindly. Give yourselves time to repair and resolve. Where do they go in? To resolve and then repair and then reset and then go out in the world and be amazing people and treat other people as well as they can be treated to, except for the Nazis. Fuck them. I'll see you next week or maybe even later this week on many different streams. Love you very much.